that? Call the meeting to order? Okay.
Thank you.
Just for the camera. All right, Madam Secretary, will you call the roll, please?
Yes. Division 1.
Here.
Division 2.
Here?
Division 3.
Here.
Division 4, I understand will be here momentarily. Division 5.
Here. Thank you. All right, and we're pleased to have Jennifer introduce our new maintenance manager.
Yes, thank you, President Beerwagon. I am very excited to announce the newest member of our executive team, if I could speak today, Mr. Steve Prosser. He comes to us from a very long career, a lot of in-depth planning background and large construction background. And so Steve joined us, let's see, was last Monday, correct? So it's his second week. So if you all join me in welcoming him to the district, that would be great.
Welcome, Steve. We're glad you're here. Okay. All right, today's agenda is workshop format, and remind the public that in the workshop format, we'll take a comment anytime during the workshop. And the first day we'll be having the hydroelectric department update, and then we'll be doing plan for water process check-in and plan for our workshop sometime around 4 o'clock. So if you're anticipating that, that's our plan, but we don't have a time certain on that. So that's the idea, right? Go ahead, Jennifer.
Correct. And if I may also just interject, we had also agreed to try out the Zoom chat function, so those folks who wanted to ask questions could also utilize the chat function. I just want to remind the public that the Zoom chat function is to provide comments directly to the board or to ask staff questions, and it is not necessarily to interact with each other in a big, large back and forth. When that does occur, one of the challenges is that we can get comments lost in the trail or the stream of the chatting. So if we can all agree to utilize it for that function, we're trying it out to see how it works. And if it works well, we'll continue to use it.
Now, are we all going to be viewing that, or is just one person? How's that going to work?
So during the plan for water process itself, I will moderate the chat so that I can bring it up with the help of Chris as well as Craig.
Oh, very good. Okay. Yeah. All right. So with that, Ken Summers, hydroelectric manager.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here this afternoon and give you an update on what the Hydroelectric Department has been doing for the last year or so. We're going to start talking about some of the emergencies and kind of unplanned events that the department dealt with in this last year. I'm going to highlight a couple of the projects that we've worked on and we're the most proud of, give you some updates from the other groups in the department, talk a little bit about our 2022 plans, and then I guess the elephant in the room, we'll talk about the South now and the Deer Creek acquisition, give you a status update on that. Before I dive too far into this presentation, I want to make sure and thank a couple of folks. Catherine over there did a great job helping me pull this together, and turns out we have some budding photographers in the department that provided some of these pictures, so thanks to Ashley, Chad, and Todd for coming up with those. All right, so our first slide here.
And Kian, hold on just one minute. Mr. Linton, it appears that you have your hand raised. Do you have a question regarding the current presentation? Oh, he says the sound sounds very distorted.
Okay.
Ricky's saying the same
Ricky
thing.
is saying the
Lower the
same thing.
microphones a little more, speak as clearly as you can.
So if I can interrupt, when we have the screen, I can only see the board. How do I fix that so I can see all the, I have to which button to push it?
Okay. Yeah, and if you could use your microphones, that would really help.
It sounds like, so Otis or Ricky, can you please confirm whether the sound is still distorted?
Yes, it is. Your sound is distorted.
It is. Mine is, it's not just my being tongue-tied today?
Say again?
Okay. Yeah, we have a sound issue.
We have a sound issue.
Good.
I have to get IT.
It sounds like both Chris as well as myself have an issue. Correct, Ricky.
Check the volume like you did last time, remember?
Everyone, just please hold for a second.
I'm gonna mute.
Is it too many of these online?
Should not be.
It's green on the Polycom, so the Polycom is connected.
Yes.
Do we have the robot
can't hear.
voice again?
Well, I don't know if I'm moving this is gonna help.
And they're saying it's occasional, not constant, about half of the time.
Most of the reason it was bad, you couldn't hear any, understand any of it.
You can't understand any of it?
Not, well, it's progressively getting worse.
Okay. Everyone, please hold, we're having technical difficulties.
Nice to see all the extra screens. I don't know what else to do. I know. You dial back in. I know. Oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Nice.
Letting IT work out, IT.
Takes some getting used to.
Oh.
Okay. Again. No, the video's going, but I'll try to reconnect. Does it hang up the Polycom, fall back in? Video in the meantime? Yeah, our feed says okay, the speed says okay, everything reads fine.
Ricky, can you confirm whether or not my sound is still distorted?
It sounds better right now.
Okay. Can, President Beerwagon, can you do a little test 1, 2, 3, see if you're...
Test 1, 2, 3. You hear us?
I do.
All right,
Sounds-
sounds like we might be fixed.
Sounds
It has to
good
be
for
in
now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for your patience, everybody. We will resume.
All right.
Here, go ahead. Go ahead. I was looking at the screen.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay. So we started the year early on with the wind event up in Bowman. During this event, we had wind gusts that were above 80 miles an hour and had 40 to 50 mile an hour sustained winds up there. We discussed this at the committee early on, but we had 11 poles with damage. Some were broken in half, some were just insulator damage, and took us about 4.5 days to get the transmission line back together. You can see in the picture on the left there, the pole you can see standing kind of in the background, and then all the wires go over to the top of the pole. So that pole was just completely snapped in half. And this was right before the big snowstorm that we got this early on in the year. It took about 4.5 days to get back online, and the crews did a fantastic job out there. Hold on, Chris.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so the second category of unplanned events that we had this year was fires. The first one is a small spot fire that we discovered out in the Bowman Lake area, and the more significant one is the river fire. And you can see on the picture on the right, that's the view from our Rome powerhouse during the event. The powerhouse tripped offline early in the event. PG&E said, get out of there and leave, we'll put this back together after the fire passes through. Shortly after that, they called us back and said that they needed power support and voltage support in the immediate region, so the other transmission lines in the area were threatened, and they needed to keep Colfax and Grass Valley online. Asked us to go back out to Rollins, put it back online so we could support the grid in the area. And this is what, the picture on the right there is what the operator
We're still having sound issues, so we're gonna just take a brief recess so we can resolve this. Sorry, apologize, everybody.
All right, I'll be right back. I just turned my video off. You can see that if you like.
You're unmuting the room.
Muting the room.
Yeah, we're unmuted.
Keep like about that much separation, or just, you know, keep a strip,
Director Heck, can you hear me okay now?
makes it really
Yeah,
easy
it
to
sounds much better.
Okay, we've kicked everybody off the internet.
Read around the plan, and then.
Start over?
Yeah, so we're gonna
Resume the meeting.
stop talking. And then we do have a very brief question in the chat from Mr. Linton. It says, is this part of the presentation better suited for a regular board meeting? Wouldn't it make sense to begin with a plan for water meeting, since that is part of what most people showed up for today? The plan for water item is a time certain item at 4 p.m., so we are unable to start that early.
All right.
Okay.
Kean, you're on for the third time.
Yes, all right.
The charm.
Last time.
I think we got it this time.
I don't know if you want me to go back to the beginning. Now you can take over.
Oh, I don't think we need to go back to the beginning, right? We need to skip to the,
There we go.
one more. All right, so the other emergency slash, unplanned event that I wanted to mention a little bit was the curtailment. That hit us early on in the year at Wilson Creek, where we were forced to stop diversion off of Wilson Creek. And that's easier said than done. Even though we're directed to, we still need to go out and do the environmental studies and make sure there aren't any species of concerns that are gonna be impacted by turning that off. So there are a number of steps involved in that. And then the second thing, which some of you may have seen on the first docket, is that we requested a variance, for Jackson Meadows, because depending on how the state board curtails our water rights, we may have to release water in a manner that isn't consistent with our FERC license. Our FERC license basically says that you can go up and flow 2 times a year and back down and flow 2 times a year. If our water rights are curtailed in such a way that we have to release any water that comes in, we may have to go up and flow and then back down and flow and then up and flow and back down and flow, and that's just not consistent with the FERC.
Can I ask a question? Is there a limit on how far up or down you can go? Is it only just up or down? It doesn't say this many CFS up, you know, is there a limit?
No, it just says up, 2 ups, 2 downs, basically.
That's it,
So,
okay.
yeah, there are ramping rates, so we can only go up or down so fast.
Okay.
But how much we go up and down is
Okay,
the issues with,
okay. How often?
yes, the number of times.
Okay, thank you.
The other issue that we wanted to highlight, and we saw this in the pipeline, if you get that, is the after the bomb cyclone, which I still have a hard time wrapping my head around that. We saw about 13 feet of rise in Rollins Reservoir. The fuel dock there at Long Ravine had a problem, and the Recreation Department, the Safety Department, the Hydro Department all worked together to get it onshore where the repairs to it can be made in a timely fashion. Moving on to the project highlights. The first one that I wanted to highlight was the Cont'd South transformer replacement. This transformer, this is the main transformer there, and it's been a bit of a problem for us. The test results have been bad for a while, and the insurance actually said that we won't cover this, you guys need to get this taken care of. So this project was to replace the generator step-up transformer. We used an electrical consultant to specify it. The civil design was done by NID staff, and then the testing, installation, and commissioning was all done by NID internal staff. The next project, in a similar vein, was a breaker replacement out there at Rollins Powerhouse. We replaced the existing 60,000 volt SF6 breaker out there with a vacuum source breaker. And I think the big takeaway from this job is that SF6 is a significant greenhouse gas. And so we've moved away from that and gone with a vacuum breaker technology, which has no significant environmental impacts. It's essentially you break your arc in a vacuum instead of using a gas as an insulator. So it's a significant environmental improvement. Again, we relied on an external electrical consultant to do the design, NID staff did the civil design, and then we did the testing, installation, and commissioning of this in-house.
Well, this is a breaker, just like a circuit breaker in our house, only large scale.
Except a whole lot bigger. You can see in that picture there, you can see the gentleman in the hard hat standing right next to it. So it's probably 12 feet tall, and it's quite a device, but it serves about the same purpose.
Yeah, okay.
The cooling water upgrade project, this is kind of a big one for us. This, the flow measurement out of the powerhouses, the Chicago Park here, was originally put in the 60s. You can see in the picture on the right is one of the old flow meters, and then you can see those little copper tubes that come off of the side of it. The copper tubes ran from various places into the powerhouse all the way into the control room, and then there were gauges inside the control room that showed the flow there based on those. Just an incredible maintenance issues, trying to keep those free from debris, keep the water moving so the gauges were reading accurately. And so we've replaced them with magnetic flow meters out there, and so they're tremendously more accurate. And what we found is that we don't have to run the cooling water pumps as often, which is a savings in terms of the parasitic load of the powerhouse. So we aren't pumping water to cool it down anymore now. We're just generating, and there's more electricity going to the grid. So it does overall improve the efficiency of the powerhouse with these types of upgrades. Next project, and this is a really difficult picture to look at. We really struggled a little bit to find a picture that I could show that showed the inside of the powerhouse that didn't give away critical energy infrastructure information. So what you're looking at is kind of the side wall and the ceiling. The orange pipes there are the fire detection system. They're little PVC pipes that run to various places in the powerhouse and sniff for smoke and can then trip the powerhouse if there's a problem. So we detect it earlier. One of the things that we're trying to avoid here, and we've gone to great lengths to avoid, is the situation like the Thermal Afterbay, the powerhouse there that caught fire and burned, and took many, many years to rehabilitate and put back online. It was a significant environmental problem. Next job.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
On these two projects that you have here, the last two that you've shown, are these examples where you do the work from start to finish within the hydro team?
So typically what we do is look at the skills that we have, use our staff as much as we can, and then farm out the pieces that we don't have the staff for. So we don't have an electrical engineer on staff, so if we need electrical engineering design, we'll go out and hire an electrical engineer to do that work. We don't have a mechanical engineer on staff, so we pick and choose from the mechanical engineers if we need mechanical design work. Generally, the civil engineers in the engineering department will do all of our civil design. And then in terms of install, yeah, we generally do our install. The project here, this Texas Creek Slope Stabilization Project, is an example of a job that we did hire out to a contractor. It was too big for our crews to handle, but we find that it's more cost effective for our crews to work inside the powerhouse. For cybersecurity reasons, if we have a contractor do it, we still have to babysit that contractor, so we have to have a body in that powerhouse anytime somebody is in there working, whether or not, or anytime a contractor is working. So there's we need to be more cost effective with staff inside the powerhouses.
Okay, thank you.
The next project here is the Texas Creek Slope Stabilization Project. They gave a presentation to the board about this previously, and you did award this contract. This work has been completed, and so we will go through this winter with the slope stabilization in place, and so that is a big improvement. We continued on our Bowman transmission line, 60 kV vegetation management. So this is, we've been really doing everything we can to hit this transmission line hard, and we're essentially treating it like the Golden Gate Bridge, where we'll go just back and forth to make sure that right of way is maintained as clear as we can keep it in the narrow window that we have.
Is this another example where hydro staff are performing the work versus the vegetation team that exists within the water area?
So there's some of both that happens here. And some of this gets contracted out. So what we've done is, some of these areas are very difficult to access, and we find that the contractor costs are extremely high. So we bid out huge sections of this and broke it all out into individual pieces, got contractor bids in on it, and looked at it and said, no, we can do this cheaper in-house. We've looked at, and then if the contractor can do it better, then we'll give it to the contractor. In terms of the vegetation crew, they do all of the herbicide applications out there for us. So that works on contract out, so, and we use the resources in Grass Valley for that. The next project I wanted to hit a little bit here is the Bowman North Dam base repairs. This was, I guess, a benefit of the drought. Water levels were extremely low, and so we had the ability to do some maintenance on sections of the dam that aren't normally visible above water. This worked with our safety department. You can see the little rig that we lowered the gentleman on the face of the dam there, so he could do the work, and the safety folks helped us make sure that we had all of that put together appropriately. That concludes my project updates. I don't know if there are anything else that you might be interested in. I'll run through what the other departments are doing, or the other groups on the hydro side, if that works.
Will you be touching on the technology implementation? I know kind of last time we heard, you were in beta testing on it.
And so that's this perfect transition here.
Okay.
So,
there we go.
Yeah. On the admin side, that's one of the things that we've been focusing on heavily is the computerized maintenance management system. We've fallen a little bit behind schedule. We're still looking at a first quarter 2022 implementation with the recent cyber issues the district's had, and then a retirement down in the engineering group of one of the key GIS folks down there has caused us to slow down a little bit, but we do expect to have this product functional in the first quarter of 2022. I don't know, is there any specific updates you'd like on that, or?
I think maybe just once you get it going and you see it, maybe 3 months from now, once you have some history behind it, it'd be interesting to hear how it is working to manage workflow and that kind of thing. And I think it is going to take us, once we get it implemented, we'll probably need 3 months after that to really start. There's a huge data lift that has to go into it, and actually I talked about that a little bit on my 2022 agenda. Because it's going to be a significant lift to take all these things that we have on spreadsheets and then load them into this program and let it kind of chew it up and spit the work orders out. Right.
So, but absolutely, this is a big deal, and I'm excited to see it moving.
Yes, us too, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Do your staff have the equipment now to, like iPads to go in the field with and actually utilize it on fly?
Mostly. We still have a couple of more phones that we're gonna need to pick up. We've, on the hydro side of the house, we're probably gonna use iPhones. And so we've probably got a couple of more phones that we'll probably pick up over the year, but, all of the senior level staff and above has a phone, and then all of the operators have a phone that they can work with.
Put their numbers in directly.
Yep, so they'll go to the powerhouse, they'll punch in their numbers, they'll hit done, and it'll
Terrific.
automatically be, we'll be able to see it in the office right away, so.
That's great.
And Kian, will you support or somehow help with the rollout of the system more broadly in the
Oh,
organization?
absolutely, yeah, and I certainly don't want to pretend that this is a hydro only.
Right.
The district will roll this out in the first quarter of 2022. I've been kind of driving it mainly because I have a significant need for it, due to the regulatory requirements, but all of the hierarchies for the equipment, all of the facilities, district-wide have been put into this, and the beta testing has been from everyone from the water operations to the mechanic shop to the maintenance side of the house. So all of the groups have been beta testing, and all of the groups will roll out in the first quarter of 2022.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Ricky has her hand raised.
Who does?
Ricky.
Director Heck?
Director Heck.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
I don't have.
Kian, let's see, on your list of key activities, you show South Sutter Water District operations and maintenance. And I don't know that we've had an update on that. Did we finalize the contract and are we servicing them now, or what's the situation?
Yeah, so the contract has been signed and finalized. We actually sent our first invoice, I believe, in September, that included that upfront cost that the board said they wanted. We haven't had the official handoff yet from South Sutter, so we're doing, or from SMUD. So we are kind of doing more job shadowing at this point, where we're going out with the SMUD operator, learning the plant. But that is in progress, and you will start to see the revenue from that on the reports as they roll in. So.
Okay, thank you for that. And then I have one other question going back one slide on the Bowman face repairs. As a layperson, that looks kind of scary when you look at how that looks. And so I have actually two questions about it. One is, do you think the work will be done before the snow falls and the weather sets in and we won't be able to?
So the panel on the previous slide there has been repaired at this time. I don't have a completed picture of that, but that entire section there that highlighted in the yellow line has been repaired and replaced.
Oh, good.
And it's not as scary as it looks. It's certainly something that requires
I'm happy to
maintenance.
hear that.
You have many inches of concrete below that, and so it's certainly safe. But it's just one of those ongoing sort of maintenance things that there is concrete patching up there that needs to be done regularly, so.
And when do you anticipate this particular project to be complete?
On the Bowman?
Yes.
So I see that North Dam repairs, that's gonna take us a couple of years of joint sealing, crack sealing. The big concrete work is done, but each one of those joints, we should probably go through, peel out all the old sealant, put new sealant in, and then patch other areas as necessary. So it'll be an ongoing project over the next couple of years.
Okay, thank you.
On the same subject, Ken, I'm confused. This is the North Dam is a rockfill dam. It has a concrete face?
Correct, it's a concrete based rock.
Oh, okay, didn't know that.
Yeah, yep. Most of it is just a big pile of rocks that are in the concrete on top, so.
Thank you.
Let's see, we did, in terms of key activities, we did touch on, the board did approve the new power purchase agreement for the Cont'd Source Powerhouse. And then the other thing that we've been working through as part of our new insurance program, Zurich sent a specialist out and they did a risk assessment and risk reduction study for the powerhouse facility. So we've been working our way through the recommendations on that, and that's looking for more fire detection projects that'll come out of that over the next couple of years. That was one of the big things that they were concerned with looking through. Moving along, so as you may be aware, the board did approve a contract with for our 5-year Part 12D independent consultant review of the safety of dams. The inspections for that were completed in August, and then we sat down with a group of folks from NID, the consultant, and representatives from FERC, and then Division of Safety of Dams, and talked through the safety of these dams. And we expect the reports for these to be delivered early in 2022. We've also been working hard on the Scotts Flat spillway job. The board will get a report on this, I would assume, early 2022 with the selected alternative. You can see here the physical model that's been built for this facility, and one of the alternatives that they're looking at to take care of the flows out of the dam here. And like I said, we expect to deliver the report for this at the preliminary design recommendations and costs early in 2022.
So the model's been constructed and they've done runs on it already?
Yes.
So they are, did anyone go up and observe it, or?
It hasn't been finalized yet, so they've built the models, they've run the scenarios, and then they're fine tuning it now, and then we'll go up and take a look at it. I don't know that we'll physically go, they've kind of, depending on what COVID does and travel, but they have adapted, and they've got apparently a pretty good camera system where you can see all different angles as the test is running.
Yeah.
And, both FERC and DSOD have seen it in the past and seem satisfied with it, so.
Are preliminary results favorable?
Well, certainly we're going to find a solution to the problem. It'll probably be this solution here. This is a square-walled spillway. It essentially replaces the entirety of the lower spillway.
Okay.
Is what it's looking like. It's going to be the selected alternative with this rectangular-shaped channel.
This is just, like you said, this is just the lower portion, so the little hatches are not the top of the dam, that's the bottom of the current spillway, right?
Well, so at the very top of the picture there are 3 blue lines stacked up there. That is the top of the existing spillway.
Oh, it is, okay.
And it drops into the plunge pool there, and there's a second weir right there,
Okay.
which is the old spillway from the original dam. We're talking about replacing everything down from the weir there. There's a second weir. All right, the next thing we've been heavily focused on is corrosion assessment and control. We started kind of our facility assessment with our tunnels, which were things that hadn't been inspected in a number of years. We walked through all the tunnels, did a condition assessment of those, and found them to be in pretty good shape. We've now moved on to the steel penstocks and steel pipelines, and are doing the condition assessment of these. And so we'll see how all that shakes out, so we can develop our capital improvement plan and move on from there. Much more to come on this one. We're very early on. We had hoped to do an internal inspection of the Cont'd South penstock in October, but the weather just did not cooperate, and that's when we got the storm, and there was just no way we could take down to do that inspection safely. So we had to punt that until 2022, but we'll get to it at that point. Dam Safety Group has also been busy with the stability reevaluation of the site of the Bowman South Arch. This is one of the things that the previous independent consultant had said that they wanted us to take a careful look at. Good news is that it was found stable, but the consultant did have some recommended improvements to the rock mass near the thrust block recommendations. So fairly quickly, I'm running out of time here before Jennifer starts giving me the,
No, you have
the
until
evil
4.
eye.
Yeah,
All right.
Yeah.
I'll keep moving along. On the hydro operations side, this is some of the reality of what the crews are dealing with here. At the Cont'd South Powerhouse, what you're seeing there in that chart in the lower right-hand corner is a overview of the prices for energy at the node that the powerhouse generates into. So you can see prices go up at the end of the day, and they're low during the middle of the day. This is actually a reasonably recent chart. I think this came from October. In the spring, you'll see energy prices actually go to near zero or even negative in some cases, and then come up to that $100 an hour in the afternoon. So the operations group, they're tasked with ensuring that we are generating at the hours of the day that we can get us the most revenue, optimize the revenue with the water that we have available. So that's what that group has been doing a whole lot of here recently. And then you can just see some of what our operators deal with on a day-to-day basis. I think they're out there actually turning the knobs and opening the breakers and doing that sort of, high voltage switching work on a day-to-day basis.
Is this the infamous duck curve?
That is the duck curve, yeah, and that is a fairly mellow duck curve.
Yeah.
Mellow duck curve.
What Director Peters is referring to is the CalISO market, where they see prices come up during the day and then drop dramatically when the solar comes online, and then when the solar drops offline, pricing in the market goes up pretty significantly, and it's really changed the nature of the CalISO market at this point. So, and that's what we're responding to and trying to optimize or maximize our revenue with. I did want to go through and show a couple of the metrics here to just give you an idea of how rough a year it has been from a water standpoint. This is our 5-year average generation versus our 2021 generation, and you can see that across the board, the drought has impacted us dramatically. The good news is that 2011, 2012, when the board negotiated the power purchase agreement for the Yuba Bear powerhouses, it was based on availability, and our availability has been fantastic this year. I knew I shouldn't have put this chart together the minute I put it in this presentation, because shortly after that, we had an outage in November in Rollins, and we're in the process of arguing about 8 minutes at Chicago Park with PG&E. So I will never put a chart showing 100% availability up again before the end of the year, but you can see we're still well ahead of our 5-year average in all cases. So I think it's really been a fantastic year on the hydro side of the house, and that even includes that Bowman wind event in January, where you can see we had an availability that wasn't particularly good. The next slide shows the powerhouses where the flows actually matter and the comparisons there. So you can see that at Combe North and Scotts Flat, in general, our summer generation numbers were pretty good when compared to the average, and that's largely because they're driven by demand. So you can see that we did all right. Combe South is, of course, the outlier here, and Combe South being run of the river. It's just been an awful year out there. The good news is that we did have a good October with that storm that came through, and then November has ticked back up again. So hopefully we'll get some rain out of these next couple of weeks, and we'll begin to start generating there. But it's certainly been a rough year there. Highlighting some of the maintenance side of the house and the work that they do. I've grabbed a couple of snapshots to try and give you an idea of the variety of the group work that the crews tackle out there. The Quartz Peak Repeater project is critical to our dam safety team. Essentially what it does is takes data and repeats it to a place that we can get the elevation and flow data a whole lot easier. The tower there has been short for quite some time. In a big snow year, it gets snowed over. We'll have to fly out there and shovel out the solar panels and shovel out the antennas. So this will stop that, and we'll never deal with that again. The next picture, the planning the new radio tower. This is for the communication tower that will go on the routine property over there that will help with our communications. It can actually see most of our powerhouses. We'll be able to bring that SCADA data into one place and operate and control the powerhouses from there. The transmission line pole replacement you're seeing there is just a routine replacement. During our inspections, we found a pole that needed to come out, and so our crews went out there and worked with a specialty line contractor to deal with that one, but we did all of the preparation work for it. Moving to the inside, you can see that this is just pictures of the routine inspections that we do inside the pipes and penstocks. This is the turbine shutoff valve, the Dutch Flat number 2 powerhouse. We are experiencing some increased leakage there, and so I expect that the full refurbishment of that valve will show up on the capital improvement plan in the coming years. And then in the Clear Creek tunnel there, you can see the steel structure. Those are vents that support the ceiling in there, and when it was originally built, those vents were cut and then installed in this wider spot, and they've become debris catchers over the years. So this will channel the debris into the flow of water, and hopefully we won't have to go in there and do that sort of work again. This all looks like, yeah. this last picture here is just some maintenance on the runners. I talk a lot about runners, and nobody has a good idea of what they are necessarily. You can see the little runner, which is the circular piece at Scott's Flat. That runner, we actually had to pull it and then took down to have it refurbished. It's a funky material. It's bronze, and it's a odd bronze compound that we can't weld on, so it has to be shop welded. The one on the right there is the runner out of the Bowman powerhouse, and so that work's needed there. We'll typically pull that one out and we can weld on it and refinish it ourselves generally. On the compliance team, I just kind of wanted to highlight a few of the agencies that we deal with on a regular basis. And some of the work we're doing, that group's doing. The quagga zebra mussel measurement is we partner with the recreation group to go out and do that work and determine whether or not we have those mussels. And then the FERC relicensing front, we have the additional information request, the AIR. You may have received notification that we filed a document with FERC this afternoon that responded to another round of questions about impacts of the project. So there's a lot of really good work that has gone into that over the last month or two to pull that together for FERC. So keep an eye out for that. On the more electrical side of the compliance group, we had some generator capability testing and modeling, and that's what you can see on the right-hand side there is the tested versus modeled data, and you can see that it's actually pretty darn good. This is a requirement to connect to the CalISO grid. We also deal with a lot of NERC alerts, which is more fun to say than it is to do. But here lately, they've all been dealing with cold weather. NERC is very interested in not having a repeat of what happened out in Texas last year. And so they're very, very focused on cold weather impacts to generation. We're not particularly worried about it. We're fairly used to dealing with temperatures like that. And then, of course, just the regular maintenance and reporting. And then the hydro compliance group is just kind of the other duties as assigned, all of the above sort of group. If something comes in and it needs to get dealt with, it's those folks that deal with it. So that's everything from hazardous material disposal to emergency action plans to FCC licensing to any of the myriad of things that we deal with on that side of the house. So looking ahead, 2022, the South Yuba Canal and Deer Creek Powerhouse, we'll talk about that briefly in the next two slides, so I'm going to skip it for now. In terms of key projects, we have the Dutch Flat number 2 fire suppression. That's the same thing we did at Chicago Park. We moved it to Dutch Flat. We have to do a RTU, or remote terminal unit replacement, which is essentially the fancy piece of computer equipment that talks to all of the data collecting units in the field and then brings it back into the SCADA. We are continuing to head towards the rewind and overhaul planning at Chicago Park. We have some relay work at Scotts Flat, at Rollins, the Scotts Flat Spillway, just a tunnel lining job on the Bowman Spalding Canal, and then communication tower will continue to move along there. On the relicensing front, FERC has directed us to work with the local water agencies to come up with a plan to respond to more of their questions, and so that'll be the big push for the first part of the year, and so we'll see how that goes. And then, of course, the CMMS, which we hit on a little bit. I'm looking forward to moving from endless spreadsheets to a computer program to deal with this work. And then now, Deer Creek. So first of all, I wanted to just give a quick high-level review of the Deer Creek and South Yuba Canal purchase. On November 14th, the board approved the purchase of the Deer Creek development, which is portions of the South Yuba Canal, and I won't run through all this, but you're also approved purchase of a bunch of lands, tangible personal property, so all of the gauging stations, the alarms, anything that's inside the powerhouse. There's some water rights, the pending FERC license, the easements encumbering any land that PG&E is going to retain, and then that approval also approves the lease agreement. In April 28th of this year, the board adopted Resolution 2112, that reaffirmed your commitment to this acquisition. And at that time, we didn't know when it was going to happen, but on November 18th, it happened. FERC issued the order approving the partial transfer of the license, and that's a lot of words there to say essentially everything that PG&E and NID asked for were approved.
I have a quick question. It notes on the previous slide that the water rights, we've got a combined 20 CFS additional water rights, and we already had water rights that we were conveying through that facility. So is this is in addition to the additional rights of what?
These are rights that PG&E had.
So what's
some
the?
of the smaller
Yeah,
tributaries
that's
that
my
are-
question.
So what's the total water rights now we have in the facility?
You know what, I'm gonna have to punt that question to when we talk about the water rights specifically.
Okay.
Because we do have that plan for water meeting coming up.
Coming up, okay, that's fine.
That, at that point, because I don't know the actual number.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
And so this November 18th approval was the last major hurdle remaining for the Southeast Canal and Tier 3 transition, and it starts the clock for the final stages of transition. We're working with PG&E to make sure that we take care of a number of closing conditions that need to be met. We need to make sure that we can interconnect this generator and sell the power. We need to make sure that all of the facilities that were purchased are in a materially comparable condition to when we signed the deal. PG&E hasn't just kind of walked away and stopped maintaining them. Our communication team is, and this is powerhouse communication as opposed to external communication, is working to upgrade a number of our networks so that we can see the canal, so that we can see the powerhouse and we can operate it successfully. FERC has required a number of drawing updates, and there are some submittals that we have to do there. We have to get a special use permit from the Forest Service, and then there's a bunch of survey monumentation that has to happen as well. I think the key takeaway from this slide is that this is going to happen. We will take this facility over, and so the million-dollar question at that point is when, right? So, best guess, 60 to 90 days from from November 18th. So this is going to happen quickly, and prepare for it. So I think that is the last slide of my presentation, and I can answer your questions.
I have a question. So this came bang, it was forever, then it's now. Do you think FERC, this is looking at your crystal ball, so if you don't have an answer, I completely understand, but do you think FERC has all of a sudden started moving? Do you think we're going to now get the Yuba Bear license in the same rapidity?
No. So I think, FERC's AIR, their additional information request, is going to take a while to do through. We still have the consultation with the National Marine Fisheries Service that has to happen. There's a significant amount of modeling that I would expect to come from that, and a lot of work that's going to go into that. So I don't expect that to drop in the next 6 months. But I also don't expect it to be out more than 5 years. We are inching closer to it every day.
Yeah.
I'll not put a number on
Yeah.
what that day is.
So I appreciate just getting a feel for when it would be. Thank you.
Director Heck has her hand raised.
Well, is Director Peters' questions complete?
Yes, yes, go ahead, Ricky.
So Ken, or maybe Jennifer, somebody, so when we first got notice of this, about the 19th or something of November, I understood there to be a 30-day window for either us or them to do something, and we were going to ask if we could have that time frame extended. Could you elaborate just a little bit on what is the 30-day window? Did we get it extended, and what do we have to do?
He's referencing prior to the order being issued. We originally thought we'd have a 30-day window for providing the property conveyance documents. I don't know what the final timing was. It was longer than 30 days within the order.
Yeah, I believe the shortest time frame in the order is that within 45 days of issuing the order, FERC wanted some updated drawings.
Yeah.
We're having those dealt with right now. that was the shortest.
One of the challenging things is FERC does not issue a draft order as part of their agenda packet for the hearing in which the order is issued, and it's not issued until after the action has been taken. So when I originally sent out the original notification of the pending hearing, we hadn't yet seen the order.
You know, Jennifer, your video is not on. Well, then I have just one more follow-up question, and that is this issue of where is it? Of going back and making certain that the system is in this, you know, roughly materially the same as when we signed the contract a couple of years ago. Is that underway, and who's doing it? Is that the consultant? Is it you guys? What?
So it hasn't started yet. It'll start, we have our first significant coordination meeting with PG&E on Thursday, I believe. And I expect to schedule that assessment. It's a lot of it, in the powerhouse, it's fairly easy, it's fairly straightforward. There are a number of tests that we can run on the equipment, and it's either a yes or no, the numbers don't lie. The challenge will be on the canal portion. And that, essentially what will happen is that we will walk the entire canal. We walked it at the time that the deal was executed. Everybody took notes on what they saw, and we'll walk it again this time and make sure, hey, that board wasn't broken before, you need to go out and fix it. And this section, it was leaking a little bit before, but now it's really leaking, you PG&E need to go out and fix that. So it'll be a side-by-side comparison of those.
Okay, and then do we not sign the final closing documents until you have, or your team has verified about the material comparable conditions?
Yeah, the deal cannot close until it's materially comparable.
Oh, good, okay.
You know what, I may take that back. PG&E has to make the corrections. The deal may be able to close before they make those corrections, but they have to arrange for them to be made, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So,
I got it. Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Director Hull.
So I have a follow-up question to that. A couple months ago, we had a presentation that you shared with us about some of the problems with the infrastructure. And there was a follow-up analysis being completed that would give us a cost estimate for repairs that fall into predating. They're not things that have happened since the agreement with PG&E has signed. So I was wondering, do we know what the cost of those repairs are, and or if not, what the timeline is to understand the cost implications of assuming this infrastructure?
And I'd have to look to Doug for the answer to that.
Yeah, so the costs have not yet been completed. We do have contract with GHD, so probably towards the end of first quarter, we'll probably have those numbers, and we'll come with a presentation to the board, which has a CIP plan that we'll develop in terms of how we move forward with replacing this facility as we move along.
So just a complementary request to that is something that myself and other board members have requested in the past. The acquisition of this property really, this is going to be, we know it's going to be a major commitment of infrastructure to make sure it's safe and reliable. And so I think that as we're completing the plan for water, we also have to do a complementary analysis of our hydro operation to understand how the different pieces and parts fit together from a financial and a strategic perspective. I do want you to know, Kean, and all the hydro team who may be listening, I have a great degree of respect for what you do and for the team and the complexity of the work. I think as we look at the plan for water and we begin to think about investments for our water infrastructure, we have to simultaneously understand the strategic direction of hydro and have great clarity on the financial contribution that's viable from your operation. So again, it's not about, you know, I think you're doing a great job in leading and managing that group, but I do think that the plan for water will be completely, will miss a major piece of information if we don't have that analysis done to dovetail in with that conversation.
Very well said.
And
Can I add on to that?
Yes.
And so, before, when we first, well, when the new board, when we started, we were told that the powerhouse is 100 years old and doesn't meet its rated value, and it's, you know, duct tape and baling wire, and that the primary reason we're purchasing this asset is for the water, because it's our primary water supply to Nevada County. And so my question is, you know, this FERC costs a lot of money. Costs a lot of money to belong to FERC. Costs quite a bit of water and money. And so, do we have the option, once we do this analysis that Director Hall is mentioning, do we have to, can we say, well, this Deer Creek Powerhouse, it's a money pit, and it doesn't, the return on the investment's really not worth it. Do we have an out and say, okay, FERC, we're gonna, this license.
With FERC?
With, huh?
You mean with FERC?
With FERC, yeah, with FERC. Do we,
The simple answer is yes.
we can say, thank you very much, but
This project's no longer.
it's no longer viable, and we're just gonna operate it for water
Yeah.
supply purposes solely.
Yeah, the only time we'd be obligated is if we entered into some type of contract for sale of the
Of the
energy
energy.
that had a specific term to it with no termination clause.
Okay.
So
Well, that's
it's something to take
comforting.
into- Yeah, it's something to take into consideration when we start evaluating contracts for sale.
Sales, right, because it would still be part of the non-FERC, non-PG&E power purchase agreement, right? It would be part of the
Not that it's not a part of
NCAPA,
the power
whatever, it's
purchase.
NCPA, okay.
That said, though, I believe I can make a profit out of the powerhouse. But I can make that powerhouse profitable.
Okay, without
He
spending,
did
without
say-
breaking the bank.
He did say, it was gonna run for another 100 years.
Yeah.
He did say that.
I like that old machine.
Okay,
That would be good to see one day.
Yeah.
yes, we
Yes.
want to see it.
We're looking forward to that.
Could I ask one other very quick question? I think it'll be quick. You did a study of the hydro operation, I believe, in the summertime. And in that, one of the most significant challenges that you faced as a manager and leader was in the recruitment and retention of staff. And I wondered how that is looking for you today.
Well, we didn't have a whole lot of success with our recruitment for, recently for an operator or a machinist. We tried to get the journey level of each of those. Now, that said, the new salaries tied to those positions hadn't been approved yet. And so we're gonna try again when the new salaries are approved. And so I'm hopeful that we'll get better results at that time.
Okay. How about retention?
Across the board, we're having difficulties with retention and recruitment. It's not something that is unique to Nevada Irrigation District. It really is a reflection of the overall labor situation right now. I keep telling everybody really is, you know, in real estate, there's always the buyer and the seller's market. And in this
Right.
particular situation, we've definitely entered into the employee market.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much,
Any
Keenan.
more questions from the board? Any member of the public like to comment or ask a question before we move on to our next item? Okay, and do we have? All right, thank you, Kian.
Thank you.
Very informative.
Good job,
Good
Keenan.
work. Yep. All right. Next, we have our plan for water process check-in, review the updated matrix. I'll remind the public again, this is our plan for water workshop, 21 minutes, and if you want to comment, just raise your hand anytime, since it is a workshop. Any questions? Comments? And also, Jennifer Hansen will be facilitating the meeting.
Thank you, President Veerwagen. This, just a couple, I wanted to, so what we planned on doing kind of at the beginning and at the end of every Plan for Water meeting that we have is just to review the process, do just a real, it could take 5 minutes, process check-in to make sure that we're meeting everybody's expectations. If there's any suggestions for improvement, that we take those into consideration. So I do know that there was some pretty mass confusions created regarding the Plan for Water start times. I just want to provide a little clarification. And then we've just had a little bit of side conversations with staff. So I do apologize. I did believe that the Plan for Water was noted to be a time certain at 4 p.m., but it was not on the agenda. So one thing to just note, with the Plan for Water meetings, for the most part, they will always be paired with a normal board workshop. The purpose of the board workshops is to have a general session and dialogue with the board regarding either department updates, project updates, and or policy considerations. We can do a little bit of a deeper dive. So the idea is those will always occur on the same day as the Plan for Water workshop. However, the Plan for Water workshop will start at 4 p.m. So in the event you're not interested in the hydro department updates or whatever we have on the agenda for that day, please feel free to join us at 4 p.m. and we'll do a much better job of noticing that. It does appear that staff caused a little confusion regarding that. So what you'll see in the packet is we did provide the updated matrix, and that was in response to the addition of the new third stage, and so that is the watershed stage. We are still fleshing out that particular component with some of our partners, including some of the tribes that are represented within our district boundaries. We did hear from them, and we do feel it's important to include them in those conversations. And so we now have a full 10 stages. So if there's any feedback on the third stage, staff is still fleshing out what that will look like, but that would be coming to the Plan for Water be heard as part of this process after stage 2, which is water rights. So for today, we're really going to try to get through the upper division overview. The next meeting would be the lower division overview, and then we will move into water rights, and then watershed, and then strategic planning.
Can I just say one more thing before we start?
Absolutely.
For the public that's watching, I'd ask that, because this is a long process we're engaging in, that we limit our questions today to the material that's being presented. So we'll get to all those questions next year and a half eventually, but if we could limit those now, it would help us streamline it and keep the process going. Thank you. I see Mr. Litton has his hand raised.
All right, Mr. Linton. Mr. Linton, please go ahead with your comment.
Hi there. I was just going to say that considering that government agencies from Alaska to Florida are now doing land acknowledgements in the beginning of public meetings, I think it would be appropriate for Nevada Irrigation District to begin doing land acknowledgements in public meetings. So I just want to acknowledge that this meeting is taking place across traditional unceded lands of the greater Nisenan Nation, who lived on the lands of the Yuba, Bear, and American River watersheds and continue to live in and celebrate these watersheds today. And then just also in the spirit of water management, I also want to acknowledge the Yuba, Bear, and American rivers that flow through our canals and into many of our homes and make life possible for many of us here today. So thank you everyone for being here today. Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions regarding the process or the newly added stage 3 for watershed?
A question. I know that this is obviously a work in progress and it's a very complex process, so I get that. Is there any thought about getting some, like having a master calendar, or where are you with developing a master calendar?
Yes, definitely.
It's a great idea.
And
We are
building a master calendar for outreach and public communication around sort of the themes and the overall stage building, but probably some sort of an infographic that we can put together that helps us kind of walk through our 10 steps, where we are, if that might help you, as opposed to this Excel sheet here.
I actually meant a real practical, you know, if
Calendar.
we're gonna meet on March 15th, March 22nd, you know, April 4th, blah, blah, blah. Just so, I think that obviously, the board needs to be here for the whole time, but members of the public are quite vested too. So I'm just wondering, kind of the calendaring piece of it.
Sure.
We certainly can.
We
It's
can definitely look
a
at
wonderful idea. I think it was on our radar, and then
Yeah.
we have not quite got it completed yet.
But I like the idea of the infographic. I think that's great, and,
Here you are, sort of thing, but a general calendar, click on it,
I believe there's
plan out a month in advance, 3
there's
months.
one on the website, but it's not populated.
Yeah, so, we will go through and populate that. Just everybody, please note that things do shift a little bit when we get behind our
Yeah.
ad
sure,
thing. So,
absolutely.
yeah, no, I think it's a wonderful idea, and we can certainly do that.
Yeah, I recognize that putting together, it's easy to sit through a presentation, but somebody put it together, so there's the work in it.
Well, and it can change if you project 6 months out and we adjust, right? Last time,
Right.
we did not finish the first stage of step 1, so those have the tendency to adjust, and so if we plan too far in advance, we're
Mhm.
kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. But we can definitely look at the calendar, get it up, and it can be interactive.
3-4 months.
Yeah, and
We can extend it as changes come.
Absolutely.
oh, yeah, for sure.
For
And I also think it was one of our tools for stakeholder involvement, so it's already in line with what we were planning on doing, we just need to get it done. So we'll bring that back at the next meeting.
Thank you.
No problem. And then, just as another point of information, and we can present this more holistically next time, we are cataloging comments that we receive and then responding to those comments. So we will continue to do that, we're just kind of fleshing out our formatting a little bit right now. And then additionally, we are uploading videos of the meeting to our NID website, and then we most recently also figured out how to do the YouTube channel. We're trying to figure out how to do the timestamping of the videos, you could fast forward to it, so that's been completed.
Great, thank you.
And also, with respect to the comments, it would be helpful if the comments come in email or a letter or something, rather than summarizing it in a spreadsheet.
Link it, the.
Actually, just
link.
maybe redact critical information, but actually
Yeah.
post the documents received.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Yeah, we do have that. We
If
do have a couple posted that we did receive. Then we have comments from last meeting that we've had to transcribe into a document, so that's up there right now.
So we will be doing both. We'll
Yeah.
do a summarization of the comments that we received during the meetings, and then the comments we received via written email or letter, we will then also include those on the website.
Super.
Push on.
Thank you. And thank you for your patience. We've been a little bit clunky, we've been a little bit behind the ball trying to get the budget done, so we're a little bit, not quite on our game, but I promise we'll get a little bit better.
I think you're doing.
You're on your game.
Yes.
All right, so
Okay.
if there's no more, does anybody from a member of the public have any comments regarding the process?
I would just make a small aside, sorry, public, that some people in my division didn't receive notice of this meeting. So I think what's happening potentially is that the emails are going into, because I think you sent a reminder message. It ended up in my promotions email.
Oh.
And so anyway, I think maybe for members of the public, if you are finding that you're not hearing about the meeting, look in your promotions file or potentially spam and see if that might be an issue.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've had, since the last meeting, we've had 5 different, individual emails that went out via the website. And so those are to 4,600 email addresses we do have. So we think we're hitting a pretty good number of folks, but clearly, we've kind of got this playbook now of right after this meeting, sort of an update, and looking forward to the next one, and then a series of save the dates, and it's coming up again in a couple days. So, yeah, if you're not hearing from that, then please check your spam folder.
I wonder if there's a way to, with other district communication, to highlight that, because you don't know it's in your promotions file or your spam folder unless you happen to look in there. I don't personally look in those folders very often. So I just happened to see this And so I wonder if there's just even a blurb, if you're, you know, if you are interested in the plan for water and don't see our notices, which come out regularly, check your spam folder. Maybe
Well,
that's
we're
something else.
gonna be pretty active on social media here very soon. Our new plan is for a lot of Facebook, LinkedIn, different social media aspects, and so I think people will be able to hear about us in
That'd be great.
yeah. Yep.
Alrighty, and I'm not seeing, we did receive a couple of comments in the chat just related to support of having the dates in,
The calendar.
yeah, in the calendar, so I think we're agreed that that's probably a good approach. And with that, I think we'll move on to the next item, unless there's any more questions from the board or from the public. All right, so we're 13 minutes in, and let's hopefully we get longer, past slide 5.
Let's get this one.
No, we're
Get
getting
down to
through it.
Bowman.
So we are trying to schedule these for 2 hours to be mindful of everyone's time, so we have through 6 p.m. So with that, we'll turn it over to Chip.
All right, thank you, and welcome everyone. Chip Close, Water Operations Manager, and this afternoon I'm gonna go over a continuation of the District Mountain or Watershed Division overview. Essentially, this is topic 1B, because we made it through 1AA. So again, this afternoon, the goal is to provide you, the public, and our participating members today, a common understanding of how and where the district operates. This information, as you will see, will become important as we move through the Plan for Water process, because after all, the success of the Plan for Water process will be largely dependent on stakeholder involvement and understanding of NID. So this is the first step in helping you understand how and where we operate. So I encourage you all to raise your hand, and being that we're all on Zoom, this is kind of a little brief how-to. Find raise your hand on the Zoom app or press star 9 on your phone, and we'll reach out to you to unmute and provide conversation. So again, we've started this presentation on November 9th, and we made it through about 4 or 5 slides, something like that. So I apologize, but I'm going to go fairly rapidly for the first 4 or 5 here, because they're kind of a review of what we've already looked at. And again, we started off discussing that NID is broken up into 2 major divisions, essentially. One is the watershed area, and that's the area where we generally collect waters from the snowpack and store it in our reservoirs. And that section of NID is generally operated and maintained by the district's hydroelectric department. The service area, which is represented in orange on the left side of the map here, that's the area where our water division takes over, and that's the area where we provide water to our customer base for consumptive use. For this afternoon's discussion, we're going to be focusing more on the right-hand side of the screen, shown in the red colors. And again, we covered this at the last meeting, but here's kind of some of the pertinent details to each half of NID. We covered the watershed lands last time and what they are and all the details. The service area, the column on the right, we'll be covering that at the next workshop meeting in early January. Map you see on the screen, this is a representation of the Middle Yuba River system, and basically the upper right-hand side of the screen is what we're going to be covering here this afternoon. But this kind of gets you oriented to where all our facilities are and shows you where the continuation of the river system eventually ends up. We'll be talking about some of the in-stream flows and where those go and what those requirements are. This map will kind of give you reference to basically the terminus of where those flows should end up in the overall system. The next slide is the South Yuba River system. And again, this is kind of a zoom in or close up on NID's facilities that we'll be going over this afternoon. And for those of you all that participated last time, we started right here at the headwaters of the Middle Yuba River system at English Meadows. And we discussed the fact that it was rather odd that NID is there because there's no reservoir or anything like that. But back in time in the late 1800s, there was a reservoir there, English Reservoir, that was destroyed. And then when NID came along in 1921, Although there was no reservoir there were still water rights there that were available and land. NID purchased both. And we continue to utilize the land and have turned the area into English meadows, and we are actively working on restoration of that meadow for environmental and water quality purposes. From there, water flows through English Meadows down into Jackson Meadows Reservoir. Jackson Meadows Reservoir is our most northerly storage facility and our largest. Basically, we can store 69,205 acre feet of the facility. So, helps when you have a pretty picture to go with it. Its typical max elevation is at 6,000 feet in elevation. We generally maximize our storage. We fluctuated between 69,000 acre feet, and we drop it all the way down to 30 to 35,000 acre feet in any given year. Obviously, in dry years, we can exercise more of that, but typically that's the range we work in. And again, we covered a lot of this at the last meeting, so I'm going to kind of motor through. The next slide here shows you the Jackson Meadows Dam. And what you can see on the lower left-hand side of the screen is where we discharge from the low-level outlet back into the Middle Yuba River system. Again, we talked a little bit about in-stream flow requirements out of this facility, but I thought this would be a very good time to discuss the different types of in-stream flow that NID is required to do through current regulation and through coming first regulation. This particular facility has an in-stream flow requirement where we have to pass water into the Middle Yuba River at all times of 5 CFS. Generally speaking, there are two different types of in-stream flow releases. This particular one is not as, is a in-stream flow release where we get to reutilize these flows. Basically, we're going to put that 5 CFS back into the Middle Yuba River, and then we'll recapture it at the next reservoir down below, which is the Milton Dispersion Facility. There are other locations we're going to discuss and come across where we have an in-stream flow requirement that we put in the creek, but it is non-recoverable to NID. In other words, it goes outside of our district and we can't recapture those flows. So we'll kind of discuss those as we come across them.
For the board members to turn off their mics, so that it doesn't pick up the papers turning.
The paper's turning, okay. Okay, so below Jackson Meadows Reservoir, we store that water. We put the water for our needs for consumptive uses and environmental uses back into the Middle Yuba River. It flows down the river, down into the Milton Diversion. And this is what the Milton Diversion looks like. You can kind of see it. It's a little tough to see, but way off in the background here, you see a little screen and a grate system. That is a diversion that puts water down into the Milton Bowman conduit. And that's the whole purpose of this facility. It's a dam, but it's not very big. In fact, it only holds 295 acre feet. So we don't consider this as a storage reservoir. It's really a diversion facility to back water up in the Middle Yuba River and push it into our tunnel and our pipeline for us. It was constructed in 1926. It is a concrete diversion. The elevation is at 5,690 feet. We do have an in-stream flow requirement at this facility currently of 3 CFS. And again, this is one of those facilities where we're passing that flow on. It goes into the Middle Yuba River and we cannot recapture it. It flows on down. Maybe YWA has access to it, but it's out of district hands at that point. Post FERC license renewal, that in-stream flow requirement changes from anywhere between 4 and 70 CFS, depending on the water year type and the time of year.
So, Chip, if I could ask a question. So in that instance, is all of the water either going into the Milton Bowman Canal or that FERC release, or is there additional water that may go into the river with the FERC water or environmental water? I apologize if I don't use the correct terminology, but I'm wondering, is it all of it's going into the Milton Bowman Canal minus the FERC flow, or is there additional water that is typical? I mean, I'm sure it varies.
It's a little bit of all of that, you're right. But in this picture, I think is a great example of what we're discussing. So this, I'm imagining, is probably late summer. And so the natural flows within the middle Yuba River are very low already. And so we are diverting what we had previously stored. We're taking it out of Jackson Meadows, pushing it into the middle Yuba River, and then taking it back into our Milton Bowman right here and taking all that flow in. Any flow requirements for FERC are being passed right here in this screen. On the left-hand side, you see the fish release.
Right.
And that's all we're passing. That's all we're required to pass. Now, given the winter months, when we have a lot of runoff and heavy flows, this facility is designed to spill over the top. So those natural flows are just spilling over the top and running on down through the system.
Yeah. And I imagine that scenario is what exists in a lot of the facilities, is that you have the overflow during the high water season, and then you've got the mandatory releases controlled for the rest of the year.
Yes.
Okay.
So again, here's a picture downstream of the Milton diversion and shows the fish release in the middle Yuba River. Here's a picture of the facility from up above. You can see it's not a huge facility, very pretty. One of the things it's known for is trophy trout fishing. Oh, I'm sure that's the cat out of the bag on that one. But it is catch and release, so very cool place. Moving on down the system, you can see this is where the Milton Bowman tunnel takes off, or the Milton Bowman conduit, depending on how you want to call it. It's a little bit of both. But the important part of this facility is this is essentially transferring middle Yuba River water into the South Yuba River watershed. One other thing I'd like to add is that wherever we have a diversion point that pulls water from the natural waterway, we're required by the state to measure those flows and report them. So we don't go into great detail in this particular set of slides, but we will in the future workshops to kind of describe how we measure these flows, how we transport that data, and how we communicate that back to the state. But just so you all know, essentially wherever we divert from a natural waterway, we are required to measure these flows at all times. Okay, so here's that screen I mentioned in the earlier slide. This was on the left-hand side of the dam if you're looking downstream. This is where the flows go into the Milton Bowman conduit. Essentially, this conduit transfers water from the Milton Bowman Reservoir, and you can see it in the top half of the picture there. It was constructed in 1926, but the pipeline portion was rebuilt in 1965. It is 3,315 feet of pipeline and 22,623 feet of tunnel. It has a maximum capacity of 450 CFS, but generally our summertime flows are only about 150 to 190. Now in this particular picture, if you see you can see the pipeline coming down the hill. Moving to the bottom left-hand side of the picture, it disappears, and that's because that's where it flows into the tunnel. The bottom right-hand side of the screen, you can see inflows from Wilson Creek. We have a natural diversion of Wilson Creek where we can and have the water rights to capture those flows and put them into this conduit. We capture those and send them to Bowman.
We capture.
As mentioned, they are subject to curtailment, so we turn that on and off as needed.
Do we divert the entire creek?
Yes, so we'll move into
Wilson
that in
Creek?
the next section, yes.
Oh, okay.
So here's a picture of the Wilson Creek diversion. It's pretty low tech. Currently, we're working on a more permanent and robust facility in the future that allows better control. Because with the new FERC license, the current FERC license, let's go to that slide. The current FERC agreement has no in-stream flow requirement, but after the new FERC license, we'll be required to do 0.25 CFS or the natural flow in the creek, whichever is less. So I hope that answers your
Yes,
question.
thank you.
And then I included the pictures in this. This is kind of a typical gauging station where we measure flows within the creek. And you'll see that little building on the right-hand side there. That is a facility. There's no power out here. It's very remote. In fact, in the wintertime, we usually can't even get here. So we really rely heavily on solar power, batteries, and technology to give us this information in real time. It can become a challenge, but that's one of the ways we navigate. Okay. And here's a picture of the outlet of the tunnel. This is where it's flowing into Bowman Lake. Okay, so we've moved out of the Middle Yuba River water system and now into the South Yuba River water system, and specifically into Canyon Creek. So if you look at, we have circled French reservoirs, that is the headwaters of Canyon Creek. And there she is in all her glory. French Reservoir is an in-stream Canyon Creek reservoir, meaning the dam itself is built within the creek and backs waters up within the channel. It is part of the South Yuba watershed, as I mentioned, was constructed in 1859 and raised in 1948. It is a concrete-faced rock fill. Concrete-faced rock fill, its maximum normal elevation is 6,660 feet. It has a capacity of 13,980 acre feet, 940 acre feet. The typical low elevation is 7,000 acre feet, so we utilize about half of its capacity every year. We do have the pre-1914 water rights to allow for the maximum storage of the facility, and its current in-stream flow requirement is 2.5 CFS. Post-FERC license, that changes from anywhere from between 5 to 18 CFS, again, depending on water year type or time of year. There's no power generation at this facility. Again, very remote. It does, however, support some recreational use. People either have very robust four-wheel drives to get in there, or they hike in and camp. Hike in only. So you can see the picture on this, in the picture of the facility, and on top of the dam, we have one of our reporting stations out there. Again, solar panels and cellular signals and radio towers. It's how we get information in and out. It's very remote. Okay. From there, we put flows down into Canyon Creek. They flow into Fauchery. Again, another pretty location. This is an in-stream Canyon Creek Reservoir as part of the South Yuba watershed, constructed in 1872 and then rebuilt in 1964 and 65. It's an earth core rock fill facility. Maximum normal elevation is 6,000 feet, 6,123 feet. It has a capacity of 3,980 acre feet. Typical low elevation is 2,200 acre feet. And we do have pre-1914 rights for storage of up to 2,600 acre feet. And then the balance of the storage is available in post-1914 rights. Current flow requirements are 2.5 CFS into Canyon Creek. Post-FERC requirements are 5 to 18 CFS. And those flows are recoverable at the next downstream reservoir, which will be Sawmill. This facility does support camping, day use, and boating, and roughly about 7,000 visitors annually.
Chip, can you hold on just one brief moment? We are getting some pretty significant complaining about the paper flipping. So, Chris, what are the Polycom, what are those picking up?
Those are speakers for the Polycom machine. I just put some pads under them to hopefully minimize sound that might be coming from the desktop.
I think that they could are they picking up them or the microphone?
The entire room. Those are mics for this entire room.
Then what's the point of these?
To help your voice be louder in the room so that it will pick up, because without those.
Oh, it's going to that. Okay.
Yeah.
If we could just minimize the paper flipping. I'm sorry.
Most of the desk down.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Moving on down the system, we generally would talk about Sawmill next, but I circled this entire complex of reservoirs because essentially, although our water rights don't say we own the water within these islands, Crooked, Middle, and Shotgun Lakes, we do and are able to capture those flows as they make their way down into Sawmill. We also own the property underneath those facilities, so they are NID facilities. And these are very, very remote. Anyway, those facilities flow down into Sawmill. And Sawmill Reservoir is an in-stream Canyon Creek Reservoir, again, part of the South Yuba watershed, constructed in 1910. It is a stacked rock dam. I wish I had a better picture of it because the artwork that to create the facility is very amazing. We'll get to a picture of it that shows a little bit of it here in just a second. The maximum normal elevation is 5,860 feet. It has a capacity of 30 acre feet. Typical low elevation is 1,600 acre feet. We do have pre-1914 rights to store up to 2,760. The rest is post-14 rights. We do have an environmental in-stream flow requirement of 2.5 CFS, which will be changing to 5 to 18 CFS following the FERC license. And again, this is one of those locations where we put it back into Canyon Creek, it flows down, and we're able to recapture it at Bowman. There's no power generation at this facility, and it does support dispersed camping of approximately 5,000 visitors annually. This next slide here should be a picture of the dam. Slide mode. And again, this picture doesn't do it justice, but somebody actually took the time, stacked these rocks very succinctly, very nicely, and made a very flat, nice rock surface. It's very impressive. Okay, that completes the supply from Canyon Creek, and we're going to move up into Jackson Creek. Fairly small watershed, and at the head of that watershed is the Jackson Reservoir. Fairly small reservoir. It is an in-stream reservoir and part of the Jackson Creek watershed, constructed in 1941 and 42. It is an earthen dam at an elevation of 6,592 feet, capacity of 1,330 acre feet. Typical low elevation is 900 acre feet, and we have water rights for 1,330, the full allotment essentially for storage. And then we have an environmental in-stream flow release of 0.75 CFS, which will be changing after the first license to 0.5 to 3 CFS, depending on month and water year type. And again, this is one facility where those in-stream flows go back into Jackson Creek and eventually make their way into Bowman Reservoir.
Chip, I have a question. So, you've been presenting how the, environmental flow requirements are identified by body of water. So are those flows cumulative as one reservoir feeds into another? So let's say there's 2 CFS required and 2 and 2. And then there's 10 CFS required at the next reservoir. Is that 10 plus 6?
No, it's not cumulative. For example, let's walk through Canyon Creek here if I can. So, at the headwaters of Canyon Creek, the Cont'd French Reservoir, the in-stream flow requirement is anywhere in the future is anywhere between 5 to 18 CFS that we're going to put down into Canyon Creek. That 5 to 18 CFS flows into Fauchery, and then the releases from Fauchery are also 5 to 18 CFS, not a doubling.
Okay.
So it continues on down into Sawmill, which is also 5 to 18 CFS, which then flows into Bowman. Bowman actually has an in-stream flow release requirement into Canyon Creek that is non-recoverable to the district, and that actually is in the future going to be 6 to 40 CFS. So you can see it kind of matches as you go down Canyon Creek, but once you get to the end of that facility, you have Bowman dumping out into Canyon Creek at the lower reaches between, again, 4 to 60 CFS, and that volume is lost to the district. The other ones, the upstream ones, we just reutilize those flows and pass them on down.
So I guess from a, as we think about how much water we really have, is it best to be thinking about kind of that where you are lower in the system and where that actually is the water that is unrecoverable. Because it becomes a little bit, it seems like, wow, we're gonna be, 400 inches CFS, but in fact, it's really some of these key, reservoir points that is really, it seems to me, what we should be, really thinking of. But I don't know, I mean.
No, that's a great point, and you're onto it. Essentially, I think one of the most important areas to focus on is when I mentioned if they're recoverable or non-recoverable.
Right.
If they're recoverable, essentially, we're able to reutilize those waters elsewhere, and for the most part, a lot of these in-stream flow releases have been designed around our needs and our consumptive uses, and they kind of mirror how we would push water through the system anyway. Not always that way, but generally speaking. Now, when we have locations where it's non-recoverable to NID, then yes, those flows are, especially after the new FERC license, those are the new flow requirements that is essentially water loss to NID and a new demand on NID.
Would a matrix help us? And then just all this down, recoverable, not recoverable, here's the cumulative amount.
Sure, we do have that spreadsheet, and I can provide it.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now, Chip, we did get a question in the chat from Harvey. How does NID view current required in-stream flows, near-term changes to in-stream flows due to new FERC requirements, and actual watershed functional flows that an attentive watershed steward would maintain even if there were no regulatory requirements? Because I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, it's what is our perspective on all of flows, whether required or not? And I think from, and Chip, please weigh in, from our perspective, we just need to make sure that we're accounting for all flows to ensure that we're meeting regulatory requirements. And in fact, we're trying to implement our future ramping requirements early. We are cognizant of our watershed and do want to be good stewards. I think we also have a very high obligation to ensure we're accounting for everything. And maybe you could talk to that a little bit.
No, I agree with all of that, and I think if I'm understanding the question appropriately, it's more about how is NID's focus on the overall watershed and how does the in-stream flow relate to that. And I think, I don't want to speak for everyone that was at the negotiating table during the FERC negotiation process, but NID came to the table with an effort to increase our contributions to the watershed, which is why you see the FERC flow rates going up in most every area. That is our conscientious effort to help the watershed, to help the creeks and the streams, and that is our contribution. And yes, it's very important to accurately measure that, not only from a regulatory perspective, but from a water rights accounting perspective, and we're doing the right thing for the watershed to ensure we don't drive things up.
Yeah, would it be accurate to say if the delicate line we walk to ensure we have enough water for customers, to ensure we have enough water for health and safety? We have a very significant revenue component that is associated with hydropower that in fact allows us to have lower water rates. We have water rights obligations that we are required to report on, and then we have obligations to the watershed we live in. So, we do take our stewardship very seriously.
Yes. It's a fine balancing act, and we all live in the community. We're all trying to do the right thing. So hopefully that answers this question. Okay. Let's see, where do we leave off? We're at Bowman. So we've now covered Jackson Creek and Canyon Creek, all which flow into Bowman Reservoir. And it's a pretty picture. I hope it looks like that soon.
Yeah.
So Bowman Reservoir is an in-stream Canyon Creek reservoir. It's part of the South Beaver watershed, constructed in 1869, rebuilt in 1926 and 27. It is an earth and concrete dam. It's built at an elevation of 5,562 feet. It has an overall capacity of 68,510 acre feet. And we typically see that low range around 35 to 40,000 acre feet. We do have pre-14 rights for up to 21,350 acre feet of storage. The rest is handled with post-1914 rights. And it does support dispersed camping and boating in the facility. And this facility supplies the head pressure for the Bowman Powerhouse. And this next slide here shows you a good overview of the facility. You can see the earthen dam on the left-hand side, and you can see the concrete arch dam on the right-hand side where we actually do spills in the wintertime when flows are high. And then in front of the earthen dam, you can kind of see the after bay that is developed below the Bowman Powerhouse. We're going to discuss that here in just a minute. That also is a diversion location for the Bowman Spalding Canal. Also, what you can see in this picture below that after bay is the Bowman House. I don't know, many of us have made it up there, but there used to be operators and employees that lived at that facility because, again, it's very remote and very hard to get to in the wintertime. So there's a picture of it.
I want to see that house.
We all do. It's cool. It's a big house.
You been there?
Oh, 100 years ago.
Yeah.
No, I've never been inside it.
And just really quick, Chip, we had one more comment I'd like to read, and it's not a question, it's a comment from Mr. Linton. Canyon Creek is where the little town of Washington gets their treated water, and then the creek flows into the South Yuba above Washington.
Correct.
So hundreds of thousands of Yuba visitors will enjoy the water in the river. Just saying it's not wasted. It will help the river not get overrun with Ditmo green algae.
Perfect. So again, part of the reason we have in-stream flows and to support the entire watershed and the community below.
Yeah, it is. It's a complex balance to achieve, but, you know, we're committed to doing it.
Yep.
So good job to you and your team, and to Kean's team.
And to the former staff who negotiated all of those. So this particular slide before you is looking down at the Bowman Powerhouse. This is basically standing on the dam of Bowman Reservoir. And in this slide, you can kind of see the forebay there in the background. The Bowman Powerhouse is an in-stream Canyon Creek powerhouse. It is within the South Yuba watershed. Constructed in 85, 86, rated at 3.6 megawatts. The power is generated via consumptive and environmental demand flow. So in other words, we pass water through this facility to send the water down to our customers in the Nevada County, Placer County areas, so on and so forth. But in this particular facility, all those in-stream flows that we have to pass down into Canyon Creek also pass through the powerhouse, so it's a double benefit there. The powerhouse is involved in a power purchase agreement with PG&E through June of 2033. And as Kean had mentioned, this particular facility were paid based upon the availability of the facility to generate power and not necessarily on how much power we produce. And here's a picture of the outlet of the Bowman Powerhouse on the left. On the right is the low-level outlet for the Bowman facility, the Bowman Dam. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, there's an after bay right below the powerhouse where we back water up again, and the specific purpose for that is to push water into the Bowman Spalding Canal. This is a nice long facility, so I just highlighted it in yellow for you. Essentially, its main purpose is to transfer Bowman water down into Lake Spalding. This facility is located within the South Yuba watershed. And again, before I get too far, here is a picture of that facility. This is at the bottom of your screen. You can see the Bowman Powerhouse, and you can see the after bay where we're backing water up. And then off to the left-hand side here, that's where the canal takes off. That's also where we do our regulation and flow control and where we dump water back into Canyon Creek for in-stream flow. The facility itself was constructed in 1926 and expanded in 1964-65. That was, I believe, in coordination with the Yuba Bear Hydro project, increased capacities. It involves 7.7 miles of canal and flume and 3.1 miles of tunnel. It can convey 300 to 325 CFS, depending on the location within the facility. And you can see we typically hit pretty darn close to that at nearly 290 CFS. So we're nearly at max capacity of this facility. The other unique thing about the Bowman-Spalding Canal is it crosses over 5 different tributaries that cross into or under or over the canal. And we actually have water rights along those tributaries, and we'll be going through those here in just a second. And we already discussed this, but we do have an in-stream flow release requirement at this facility, at the diversion facility that flows water into Canyon Creek. It's currently 2 to 3 CFS. In the future, it will be 4 to 60 CFS. And there's the diversion facility itself. Okay, so following that yellow line down, the first tributary you run into is Texas Creek. And the unique thing about this, I circled it all in red, but essentially the headwaters of Texas Creek, you can see there's a number of lakes. There's Rock Lake, Bullpen Lake, and Lindsay Lake. You can see underneath their labels, they're all PG&E facilities. So PG&E is actively operating these with their own water rights. They're pushing those flows down into Texas Creek, which flows into the BS Canal, and we convey those flows for them and with them, in conjunction with them. And we do all this through a coordinated operating agreement. And there are many facilities that we share, and we're going to walk through a lot of those as we continue on. But the coordinating operating agreement basically spells out how we share waters in these areas, who takes priority, and it also talks about the coordination. And we essentially call and talk with PG&E on a weekly basis to coordinate all of this movement through the system.
Do they contribute financially for the upkeep of the canal as well? Is that part of the coordinating agreement?
That is not part of the agreement. Because we have shared facilities, they have some incurred costs to move our water. Therefore, we have also some incurred costs to move their water. In this particular location, all these tributaries, we have shared water rights. So the first roughly 3,500 acre feet of water rights is PG&E's. We use that, we track that for them and send it into the system. The balance is then NID.
Huh.
So this particular facility, a very beautiful facility. It's a big old giant waterfall that flows into the canal itself. Very remote, hard to find though. And this particular facility did not have an in-stream flow requirement, but post-FERC license it will. And that will be a 0.6 to 3 CFS depending on the month and water year type. And this is one of those facilities where it is a non-recoverable in-stream flow release. This is kind of a backed up picture of the facility. What you can see is that truck in the picture right there with that arrow above it. That Bowman-Spalding conduit is actually in the mountain in a tunnel right there. It pops out for a very short stretch where Texas Creek crosses, where we can capture those flows, and then it goes right back into a tunnel.
It's amazing ever conceptualized this whole thing, is all I gotta say. I mean,
I was going to say, reading the history about the coordinated agreement goes clear back to the formation of the district. It's fascinating, the nuances, and I've asked the same question. Okay, they get this, they get that water, we get this water, and they make this power, and it's quite a complex deal.
A lot of it came from the Excelsior Mine Company,
Yeah.
which then became
Right.
PG&E, and we split all those facilities up. It's pretty crazy.
It is crazy.
Moving on down the Bowman-Spalding Canal, the next tributary you cross is Clear Creek. Clear Creek diversion is shown here in this picture. It's a fairly small watershed with no reservoirs above it, but regardless, we have water rights to capture some of those flows. You can see the long concrete structure right next to our BS canal there. You can see the little opening in it where water's flowing across. Now, this particular facility does not have a current in-stream flow requirement, but in the future it will, of 1 to 6 CFS. And you can kind of see in the picture there, almost directly across from where water's coming in, we have a slide gate there that allows us to push water through. Those are going to be a challenge for us in the future because they weren't really designed to do small flow releases. So when we get our new FERC licenses, that's one of the facilities we're going to have to figure out how we regulate those very small amounts downstream.
And is that water loss?
Yes, that is non-recoverable. Yes, all of these tributaries currently have 0 in-stream flow requirements, but in the future FERC license, they all will come now with some in-stream flow requirements. This is just a shot of what the overflow facility looks like. I must admit, I didn't bring it up, but the other challenge with these facilities is measurement of water coming into the BS canal. This is upper country, and you can get a lot of snowpack up there, and then at times you get rain on top of that snow, and you get huge flows in these small creeks. And designing a gauging station to measure the full span of flows that you can witness in these locations is virtually impossible. When you design it small enough to capture the low flows that we're concerned about, generally speaking, those smaller stations are gonna get wiped out in a flood event. So we're working on, and we'll have to design something pretty robust in these facilities for the future.
Naturally, would any of these creeks support the post-FERC license requirements throughout the year, or would they go dry in August and September?
So you're gonna find that when you look at the details within the in-stream flow requirements, it's generally gonna say something to the effect of 0.25 CFS for the natural, if it's there. If there's no natural, you don't have an obligation anymore.
Okay.
But generally speaking, most of these trips do have.
They do have it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Certainly
there,
the ones with reservoirs above it, right?
Of course.
and there's no water rights associated with these, it's just whatever comes out of the watershed at those locations?
No, these do have active water rights, and we'll get into
Oh, they
those
do.
discussions
Okay.
in the water rights workshop. Yeah, each one of these trips comes with its own set of water rights.
Okay.
Okay. Moving down into the next tributary, we have Fall Creek, and this is one of those facilities that does have PG&E reservoirs up above it in Ely and Carr Lakes. This particular diversion facility is a little bit more robust than those other ones we've talked about. And again, it currently has 0 in-stream flow requirement, but post-FERC license will have 2 to 30 CFS or natural flow, whichever is left. And this is one of those locations where it's also lost to NID. This next slide, though, kind of gives you an overview of the facility itself. What you can see in this slide is that is our Bowman Falls Canal, and Fall Creek is actually traveling underneath it. And then up here in the right-hand side of this picture is the actual Fall Creek diversion dam, where we can take the natural and put it into this elevated swim section and then combine it into the BS canal. Kind of cool, but also interesting is this slide here shows you the myriad of materials we are working with up there. The Bowman Spalding Canal that you see in the background there is all steel and galvanized. It's one of the more robust crossings we have up there, actually. Most of them don't really look like that. But the Fall Creek diversion, as you can see closest to you here, is all wood. So we have quite the myriad of different materials and facilities that we work with out there. Moving on down the system, we have Trap Creek is the next tributary. This has a very small watershed, not a very large diversion location at all. No current in-stream FERC requirement, but post-FERC license renewal, it will have 0.25 to 3 CFS, depending on the month, year, and type. And here's a picture showing the right-hand side up here is where it comes in. And if and when we have to release additional in-stream flow, they'll go out this side here, right here. Moving on down into the last tributary into the Bowman Spalding Canal, we have the Rucker Creek. And Rucker Creek, again, has a couple of PG&E facilities above it. The headwaters are Blue Lake, PG&E facility, and then Rucker Lake. The current in-stream flow requirement is 0. The post-FERC license is 0.3 to 3 CFS. It's very hard to see in this particular slide. We'll show you the next one, try to orient you. So this is looking down upon the facilities, and it's hard to see, but the right-hand side of this picture is where the creek comes in, flows into the BS canal here. If we have to do any flow release, they'll go out right here at the station. You'll also notice that the canal kind of just disappears off the screen here. Well, that's because that's where it flows into a tunnel on its way to Fuller Lake. So Fuller Lake is a PG&E facility. It is a reservoir that is on the BS Canal system. It passes NID water into Lake Spalding as well as PG&E waters. It has a capacity of 1,150 acre feet, and this picture of the dam I put in there because essentially the reservoir itself and the dam is PG&E's responsibility. However, if you'll notice at the top of the dam there, you can see the continuation of the BS Canal. Because that BS Canal is an NID facility, NID or PG&E tells us that is our section to maintain. And that's all part of the negotiations of the COA.
Bishop, just really quick here, we do have a comment from Harvey. It says, it seems to me that definitions as to recoverable and irrecoverable flows in context to diversions, district diversions, water rights, and watershed functional flows for stewardship. From the watershed context, all flows are recoverable that are not diverted out of it in general.
So perhaps it's a bit semantics, right? Recoverable to NID versus recoverable to the watershed. I see the watershed.
Yeah, for sure.
I've been stating it based on recoverable to NID. Ultimately, those flows are recaptured by the entire watershed, yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I think I think sometimes our, the words we use may be a little bit offensive from a watershed perspective, but I don't think it's meant to be. I think we are just trained to track every drop of water because of reporting, because of needing to ensure we're moving water where it needs to move for our customers, and then also for hydropower purposes. And so we do have to essentially track and account for water as we move it through the system for our water rights. So we certainly don't mean to be offensive from a watershed perspective. I think it's just our accounting of things that we have to do from an actual practical perspective.
And in relation to what we do day to day, this is what we analyze.
Right.
It just comes out of us that way.
Yeah, I think one of the hard things is, and I think this is providing a really good perspective, is if we need to provide water down in the lower portions of the district, it's not as simple as just, turning a valve and water appears down there. It is very much a concentrated effort that takes into account a lot of different issues. And so from us, we're more going through kind of this large accounting exercise. And I think that's where some of our terminology comes from, which, doesn't necessarily speak to the value of the watershed. I think it's just our technical aspect of how we move water around and how we have to account for it and report for it.
Yes, I expand. So again, we're still at Fuller Reservoir, and as we mentioned, the whole point of Fuller is a bit of a gauge regulating reservoir as we continue down the BS Canal and feed water into PG&E Spalding Lake. Now, as I mentioned before, in the Bowman Spalding Canal, it's a mix of NID and PG&E water. As that water flows into Spalding, it is run through a powerhouse, specifically Spalding number 3, where PG&E generates those flows. There it is, Lake Spalding. That is a PG&E facility. It is an in-stream reservoir on the South Yuba River, owned and operated by PG&E, on-stream dam. Maximum capacity of 74,773 acre feet. Their typical low level for operations is about 20,000 acre feet in the winter months, the beginning of winter, I should say. Again, it includes multiple powerhouses. So we just discussed that Spalding number 3 is where the BS Canal comes in. However, Spalding 1 and 2, they are able to generate as water is leaving Lake Spalding and going into either the South Yuba Canal or the Drum Canal. We talked about the coordinated operating agreement, and then we'll talk about where these flows go out of Spalding. Spalding is kind of in a unique area where it's at a split of a bunch of different facilities. So we we have the ability to take the water that's in Spalding, both NID and PG&E water. It can flow either naturally into the Yuba River and flow on down the South Yuba River, as shown at the top part of the map here. Or it can go through the powerhouse and flow down the South Yuba Canal, which is shown here in yellow. Or it can go through the powerhouse and down the Drum Canal, shown in green here. Or it can go into either one of those canals and then dump into the Bear River. So a multitude of options from this one particular location. For now, we're going to focus on the first section, the South Yuba Canal and the Deer Creek watershed.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So all of these facilities were constructed back in the 1800s for mining, or are they all modern canals and conveyances?
It's a mix.
It's a big, huge mix.
Some of this was built and rebuilt during the Yuba Bear Hydroelectric generation project, and that was in the 60s. So many of these facilities existed, but they were tore down and upgraded to facilitate higher flows and support the hydroelectric generation. On PG&E side of the world, their stuff is generally very senior, very old. But again, it's a mix.
It's a mix. Amazing.
So the South Yuba and Chalk Bluff canals, we talked about that a little bit earlier in the hydroelectric department update. But essentially, its main purpose is to transfer NID water from Lake Spalding to the Deer Creek watershed. It's currently owned and operated by PG&E, kind of, as you heard. We do have a purchase and sale agreement we are working through, and as Kian has mentioned, we did get FERC approval, so it is moving along. The hydraulic design capacity basically at the head of the canal is about 107 CFS roughly. But as you move through the system and down towards the end of the canal, it reduces down to about 85 CFS. You can see in this note here, it says NID's portion of the South Yuba Canal. Although we're purchasing this facility, we're not purchasing the facility all the way up to Spalding. There is a short section of piped section that is PG&E owned, and they're going to maintain ownership of that. Of the remaining canal, NID's portion is 13.98 miles, 8.6 of it is open ditch, 4.6 is flume, and 0.71 miles of tunnel. Once you make it through the tunnel, the canal changes name, it turns into the Chalk Bluff Canal, which then includes 3.2 miles, 2.9 of open ditch, 0.2 of flume, and 0.5 of pipe. The terminus of this facility is the Deer Creek Powerhouse, which has been there for quite some time. 1906.
Yeah.
Capacity is 6.9 megawatts, although I'm told it doesn't generally run that high. It runs somewhere in the 5.7 range. Now, why is this facility important? Well, you can see in this map where the powerhouse is, and it dumps water from Spalding, NID water from Spalding, down into the Deer Creek up here. You can see in this map, the watershed available to fill Scotts Flat Reservoir is not very big. And without the South Yuba Canal, just the natural watershed itself would not refill this reservoir year over year. So we definitely need these imports to help support and fill the Scotts Flat arm and the Deer Creek side of NID's operation.
Is the Chalk Bluff Canal our canal?
It will be, yes.
Okay, that's part of the South Yuba deal.
Yes.
Okay.
Jeff, we have a quick question. How much water is annually conveyed now in the South Yuba Canal and the Chalk Bluff Canal?
Well, it varies from year to year based on hydrology.
The flow rates, I don't have an exact.
Yeah, so in the summer months, we get pretty close to maximizing the facility. We get up there in the high 70 CFS flow range. In the winter months, things ramp down quite a bit for a multitude of reasons. One is you don't need the flows for consumptive uses anymore, but two is PG&E generally runs the facility much lower due to winter operations and concerns in weather and storm events. And that reduces flows down to around that 30 CFS range. So the total, we can talk about that at a later date. I don't have that on the top of my head, but those are the flow ranges we see.
That was the top of, what did you say, 70?
So we run roughly 75 CFS in the peak summer months.
And when operations drop, it was in the thirties.
Yeah, about 35 CFS. And then during a major storm event, they'll either shut the facility down completely, which hopefully is rare, or sometimes leave a little bit of flow in there to build up the snow and float it as it moves on down the system during a major winter.
A couple of slides ago, it said that the actual capacity, the hydraulic design is 107 CFS, but the actual capacity is 85.
Yeah.
And so we just don't have water rights for 85, or?
We can, so it's not our facility, so we're at the mercy of what PG&E is willing to flow in it. And they, generally speaking, don't like to go much above that high 70s mark.
Okay. But we could, when we acquired it, if,
We could, I think it would behoove us to run some flow checks first.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, thanks.
Chip, another question. When you were talking about Spalding, you said the minimum storage is 20,000 acre feet. So in the situations like that, because you look at all the reservoirs going down, 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 and some of them getting probably at minimum storage potentially this year, not ours, but others in the state. What happens when, you know, I mean, whose water is that 20,000 acre feet? And who stops it, you know, from, I mean, PG&E is controlling no further diversions go out at that point, and then as water comes in, I know you're measuring all those things, but how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Who accounts for all that?
Yeah, well, and
Thank you,
Tor.
Thank you, Tor.
The PG&E has their own, person involved in taking care of their watershed. They want to maximize generation, they're a power-oriented group. So they have, runoff totals that they calculate based on snowpack, just like we do for our watersheds. And they have operating, areas that they want to be in to, one, prevent spill, right, so they can maximize generation. And so that's why they target those levels based on the watershed and what it provides in the region into Spalding.
But to answer your question on that 20,000 that's at the bottom pool, whose water is it? It's PG&E's water. The water that they're putting into the canal system for us is being put in and diverted right back out. They essentially try to push that water through. There are times when the mismatch happens, and that's when the accounting and record keeping gets into play and Tor gets involved in all of that. But generally speaking, they're just pushing our water through their facility for us.
And isn't that low-level amount below the spill weirs, and
Yes.
it's just dead pool, like, you can't, oh, it's not the dead pool, it's above the dead pool?
No.
Okay.
That, by the way, that 20,000 acre feet, it's just a rough target. It's not a requirement or anything like that. It's just something they try to hit, because in their years of experience, they have found that anything below that, if it's a dry year, it's hard to refill the whole thing. But if you keep it too high, then you're just spilling like mad throughout the winter. So this is just kind of one of their targets. Okay, so Scott's Flat Reservoir. Scott's Flat Reservoir is an in-stream reservoir on Deer Creek. It was originally constructed in 1948 and then raised in 1962-63. It is an earthen dam concrete spill, maximum capacity of 48,547 acre feet. Its typical low elevation is 33,000 acre feet. However, again, this is similar. It's one of our targets, but it moves depending on the year. In fact, this year, what did we hit at Scott's Flat? Do you know?
Scott's Flat wasn't too bad, we got to 24, we're currently around 29.
So you can see we went well below the normal target, but it's a very dry year, so that's to be expected. Our water storage rights at the facility include consumptive and non-consumptive uses. In other words, we can store water in there and utilize it for delivery to our customer base for irrigation or whatever. But we also have water rights for power generation, things of that nature. The facility does support a lot of recreation, roughly 110,000 annual visitors. It has 3 boat ramps, 2 on the Highway 20 side and 1 in Cascade Shores. And it is critical to NID because it supports a majority of the water deliveries to the folks in Nevada County. It also acts as the forebay for the Scotts Flat Powerhouse. And here it is in all its glory. And the Scotts Flat Powerhouse, we take the water that's backed up in the reservoir, We pass our consumptive needs through the powerhouse and make generation with it as we push water into the system for delivery to our customers. And this essentially ends the Mountain Division's operations in Deer Creek, or hydroelectric operations in Deer Creek. From here down, the Water Division takes over, and we'll be discussing the rest of that at the next workshop when we go over the water facilities.
And with that, can we take a very short break,
Sure.
please?
Works for me.
Maybe they didn't do that.
Yeah, we are going to take a very short break, but just as a time check, it is 5:12 and we're shooting to be done at 6 PM. How are we looking?
We'll get
Okay.
Be
All
done.
right, we'll be back in 5. to be resuming momentarily.
Okay, we're now unmuted and live.
Hey.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We, want to go ahead and turn the slideshow back on?
Sure.
So we made it down through the Deer Creek watershed up to Scotts Flat. And for the next section, we're going to jump back up to Spalding.
Trying to figure out which one I am. Oh, right here.
Next slide is so we're going to jump back up to Spalding Reservoir, and we're going to take the other canal out of Spalding, which is the Drum Canal. You can see it reflected in this map in green. And essentially, the Drum Canal is, for the most part, pushing mostly PG&E water, but it does include NID waters as well. That water is put into that canal and conveyed down into the Drum Powerhouse. And here's a picture of the Drum Powerhouse. That powerhouse is pushing that water down back into the Bear River. And just below this facility is another after-bay facility that backs water up in the Bear River and allows us to put those waters into the Dutch Flat conduit. So that's a lot of infrastructure I just described, but it's more clearly shown on this map. It's just very small and hard to read. Essentially, we're passing NID and PG&E water down the Drum Canal. It goes through these two powerhouses, dumps back into the Bear River where it's backed up, and then pushed into the Dutch Flat Conduit 1 here in green, and the Dutch Flat Conduit number 2 in yellow. One is a NID facility, one is a PG&E facility. And you can see that a little bit better in this slide. There's a lot going on here. If you look at this picture, you can see where it says Bear River right here in the description. Look at the right-hand side of the picture above that. You can see two pipes coming down over the hill. That's the drum facility coming down. The drum powerhouse itself is right there at the base of where that Bear River description is. The Bear River itself continues to flow down, and you can kind of make out a dam right here. That's the drum after bay. We back water up there and pushes water into the Dutch Flat number 2 conduit. You can see it here along the mountainside.
You're so fast, it's hard for me to follow with my arrow.
Number 1 is, the Dutch Flat conduit number 1 is underground and you can't see it. So anyway, NID owns the Dutch Flat number 2 facility and pushes water down into the Dutch Flat 4 bay, which is acting and providing the headwaters for the Dutch Flat powerhouse. Here it is in all its glory. In this particular slide, you can see NID's facility up there, but you can also see down here at the bottom of the slide, PG&E's Dutch Flat number 1 powerhouse. Both of these facilities dump water back into the Bear River or the after bay for these two facilities. We'll cover that in just a second. But NID's Dutch Flat number 2 is an off-stream Bear River powerhouse constructed in 1964-65. Rated at 24.57 megawatts. Power is generated, again, via consumptive demand and run-of-river. So there's excess flows in the Bear River. We're able to capture some of that, put it back through the powerhouse. We do have a power purchase agreement with PG&E through June of 2033. And again, as I mentioned, it does discharge into the Dutch Flat after bay, which you can see in the next slide.
And Chip, there is a quick question, I think, I don't know if we have a really good answer for it right this minute, but I did want to acknowledge the question from Ms. Suarez, and it is, when will NID initiate the new minimum in-stream flows in the Bear River, since there is a commitment to water stewardship? So I think, we're working to, I guess our answer is, I think we're all working towards it. I don't know that we have figured out all the nuances of how it impacts our ability to generate power. We have been trying to comply early with the ramping requirements. We have had some struggles, but we are still trying to juggle a number of things to get ourselves sorted out. Do you have anything more to add?
Well, I would say that I think this process we're going through right now, the Plan for Water process, is going to help guide us in how much water we have for the future, how much the in-stream flows affect our operations and will help us determine, should we turn those on immediately because we're unaffected, or is it really a detrimental effect that we should reanalyze? And I'm not saying that we can renegotiate any of this, and nor that we would want to. I'm just saying that I think this process gives us a more holistic picture of where NID is and its supply and demand, and will help better inform those in-stream flow releases.
I would agree. And then we have one more question, from Harvey. Drum canal design and operational capacity flows are not shown. What are those, and what is the flow that is typically conveyed?
Great question. It is a PG&E facility, so I do not have all the design specs for that facility.
Okay.
Max flows in the summer-ish. You know, up here, top of my head, 600, we can get some more information on that and come back.
We'll have to get some more information for you, Harvey, and come back to more accurately answer that question.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we made it to, yeah, so here's the Dutch Flat Afterbay. Dutch Flat Afterbay is an in-stream reservoir on the Bear River. As I mentioned before, both the Dutch Flat number 1 and number 2 powerhouses discharge into this afterbay. It was constructed in 1964-65, has a storage capacity of 2,037 acre-feet. It does have a current environmental flow release, in-stream flow release of 5 to 10 CFS, and post-FERC license renewal will be 7 to 45 CFS, but this is a recoverable in-stream flow release, and that it goes back into the Bear River and it's recaptured at Rawl. One of the things I wanted to point out in this particular slide is that you can see the dam here. You can also see at the base of the spillway where we're doing our in-stream flow release. But above that, you can see this is the next facility we are going to discuss, and that is the Chicago Park conduit. This Dutch Flat Afterbay is essentially backing the water up and allowing us to push the water into the Chicago Park conduit.
Did NID construct it? This was all PG&E constructed facility?
No, this is actually part of the Yuba Bear project, and it was NID construction.
Okay.
The Chicago Park conduit, of course.
Yeah.
And same with the Dutch Flat.
And Dutch Flat Afterbay. Okay. Okay, so moving on, this here is the map that shows where Dutch Flat Afterbay is, and then where we capture those water in the Chicago Park conduit and push it into the Chicago Park powerhouse. And here's just another view of where the Chicago Park conduit takes off. It is a 7.2 mile concrete flume and gunite line ditch, capacity of 1,100 CFS, constructed in 1964-65. And this picture always impresses me. We use gravity, so you got to follow the contours. It's always amazing to see the kind of construction they do to make that happen. So it really wasn't just a drunk construction crew. They actually did this on purpose. And it's actually rather impressive.
That's a massive amount of water, too.
Yes, it is. Very high volume. That flows on down into the Chicago Park forebay, which, as you can see in this picture, really is just kind of a wide section of canal more than anything else. But it does provide the head pressure for the Chicago Park powerhouse, which here's a picture of it. It is an off-stream Bear River powerhouse constructed in 64-65, has a rated capacity of 39 megawatts, so a pretty big facility. Power is once again generated via consumptive and run-of-river flows, and we do have a power purchase agreement with PG&E through June of 2033, and again, this discharges into the Bear River just upstream of Rawl. And that takes us down to the Rawlins Reservoir.
Can I ask a quick question? So that 1,100 CFS really struck me, because that's the amount that's in the South Fork of the American River, and I kayak, a lot of water.
Yes.
But then I wanted to look back up at how much water is conveyed into Scotts Flat Reservoir. So is that
Rawlins Reservoir?
Scotts Flat? I'm looking at the two watersheds, and what's the relative amount of water that's going into Scotts Flat versus is going through Rawlins?
Yeah, great question. So keep in mind, the Deer Creek watershed and the amount of water that's being pushed down the South Yuba Canal is a fairly small amount in comparison to what's moving through the Bear River system. As we mentioned, in the peak summer months, it's 70 to 75 CFS, generally speaking,
Right.
in the Deer Creek side. On the Bear River side, that number is much bigger. Somewhere in the neighborhood of that 600 to 700 CFS that Tor's talking about. And it's not just NID water. It's also PG&E water that's being pushed through PG&E's facilities. And below Rollins, we haven't got there yet, but below Rollins, it's discharged into the Bear River Canal, where PG&E takes it down the Bear River Canal and eventually flows it into Folsom. So there are a number of different players on the Bear River side of this facility. It's not just NID, and that's why the numbers on this side are much larger. Additionally, as I mentioned, generation is not just with consumptive flows, it actually uses run-of-river flows as well. So that's why that extra capacity in the Chicago Park conduit is a luxury. We can use the natural flows in the river and generate excess power that way too.
So what, percentage of our water is going in each of these primary systems?
That's a great question. Generally speaking, it's close to 50. It's more like 55% is going into Placer County, and those diversions are occurring down below Rollins and Combie.
Okay, so, and South Nevada County?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
And so 55% of the water is going to Placer County and 45 is used in Nevada County?
55% is being diverted between Rollins and Combie and supporting a majority of Placer County and small portions of
Nevada.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and 45% Nevada. You want to kayak it?
That's a rough number.
Yeah.
I mean, it changes years.
And does most of that 1,100 CFS, does all of that 1,100 CFS go through that penstock, or I see there's a river here as well, so that's how much you put through the penstock?
Capacity of the penstock is 1,100 CFS. Yeah.
Okay.
Now, is it safe to say that the, South Yuba system provides more treated water customers with water as opposed to going through Rollins?
It certainly provides water to more drinking water facilities than any other location.
Right, because that's what gives water to Nevada City, Valley.
Nevada City, Grass Valley, our treatment plants, including Lake Wildwood,
All-
the George Lombardi.
All the rest of the county.
You know, so I bring that to light just because of the considerations of importance of the South Yuba Canal.
Oh,
Right.
absolutely.
Right, now that's,
And Alta Sierra is served from, is that served from Combie, the
New
Bear
George?
River system?
No, it's served by the Deer Creek system. on
Deer
the
Creek,
Cascade.
okay.
We'll get into those details at the next workshop when we
Okay,
get
so
into
sorry.
the distribution system. That's okay, it's a good question.
So they're all good questions, but I think it takes a lot of questions to get everybody to
Yeah.
start piecing it out.
This is extremely helpful.
I think so.
Yes, it really is.
I think it's important to point out that we operate in a number of reaches, but we're not just dealing with natural flows in these creeks. There's a lot of imported water going into these facilities, including the Deer Creek, the Bear River. A lot of the flows we see in these creeks are imported NID water or PG&E water.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving into Rollins Reservoir. Rollins Reservoir, obviously a very, very popular facility around here, lots of recreation that occurs. It is a in-stream Bear River Reservoir. It was constructed in 1964-65. Earthen Rockville Dam, maximum capacity of 65,988 acre feet. Typical low elevation there is 40,000 acre feet, and we target that because we generally can keep the boat ramps in at that elevation, so try not to leave those high and dry. It has the water rights that include consumptive and non-consumptive uses. Next one, it does have an environmental flow to the Bear River. The current requirement is 15 to 75 CFS, depending on the season and water year type. Post-FERC license, that changes a little bit. It goes from 15 to 125 CFS, depending on the month and water year type. This is a recoverable in-stream flow because we can capture it at Combie and utilize it depending on the time of year. And as I mentioned, a very popular recreation facility. It has 4 different campgrounds in Greenhorn, Orchard Springs, Long Ravine, and Peninsula, and we attract a staggering 120,000 people per year of visitors every year. That's impressive. This particular facility discharges and acts as the head pressure for the Rollins Powerhouse. That is an in-stream Bear River powerhouse constructed in 1979-80, rated at 12.15 megawatts.
Ricky, you have your hand raised?
Director Heck, do you have a question or comment?
Thanks, yeah. For Chip, just a general comment in case we don't get to it, but my goodness, thank you so much. This is an incredible amount of work that you and your staff did to put this together in such a, in a way that is so understandable and really shows the system. So I just thank you so much. But then my question is, with regard to Rollins, how much of the 65,000 acre feet is ours versus PG&E's in there? Is it 10,000 PG&E? Or
Yeah, great question. Per our coordinated operating agreement, it does spell out that PG&E has 10,000 acre feet of storage availability in Rollins. There's some caveats in the agreement that basically if NID draws Rollins Reservoir down due to our consumptive needs, that PG can temporarily use that space to store a little extra, and they generally do every year. That's to cover them through the Bear River Canal outage. So
okay.
the general answer though is they have 10,000 acre feet of storage available in that reservoir.
And Chip, isn't it correct, we just recently saw their storage increase, now it's been being drawn back down since we are getting back into diversion time?
Yes, and again, that was to cover the outage that they did. So they basically shut their canal system down and they utilized whatever storage they've developed in Rollins to feed the lower half of their system while they're working on their canal. And that is an annual occurrence. And again, that's where the coordination with TOR and PG&E all comes into play, along with Hydro and everybody coordinating these outages. It's a very complex system.
And so just for the board, that's what we just saw on those storage and diversion reports.
Right.
We saw their storage increase, and then we saw it starting to get drawn back down.
Yeah, and I have a question about that. So if they store it in Rollins because the Bear Canal is out in an outage, how do they get it to their system? Do they run it down the Bear River and?
Yeah, so great question. They can separate the canals, and they generally do. They'll work on the upper half and then send the water into the lower half and vice versa.
Or they can bypass?
It just depends on where the water, or where the work is occurring in any given time.
And then we have a quick question from Mr. Brandstrom. Could you please repeat where the water for Grass Valley comes out of?
So the water for the city of Grass Valley is supplied through the district's DS Canal, which comes out of Scotts Flat Reservoir. It's supplied by the Deer Creek and the South Yuba Canal.
So that's the alternative system as opposed to the Bear River system.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Covered. Here's a picture of the Rollins Powerhouse at the base. The powerhouse itself obviously is on the left. You can't see the discharge occurring because it's underwater, but it is pumping water out. The pipeline that you see on the right, or the discharge, is the low-level outlet for the Rollins dam itself. Now, the next and last portion of tonight's discussion is, after we push water out of Rollins, it can go two directions, and it's not shown on this map, but basically, right below the Rollins Powerhouse is the Bear River Canal that takes off and heads off into the North Auburn area, and/or the natural flows of the Bear River continue on and go down into Cont'd Reservoir. For tonight, we're just going to talk about Cont'd because it's another one of our Mountain Division or hydroelectric facilities. We'll talk about the Bear River Canal at our next workshop and show you where all those waters go. But for now, we pass water through Rollins and down into the Bear River, send it down to Cont'd Reservoir. Cont'd Reservoir is an in-stream Bear River reservoir. It was constructed in 1928. It is a concrete arch dam. Has a maximum capacity of 5,555 acre feet. Its typical low elevation is 3,000 acre feet, and we do have the water rights to store its maximum capacity. And then below that facility, we have an environmental in-stream flow release of 5 CFS, and that is not recoverable. We don't have any facilities below Cont'd Reservoir in the Bear River. Our discharges below that facility, however, do get recouped by South Dakota Water District, obviously. We do have recreation at the site. It includes, it's kind of a private reservoir, but the local folks that live along the lake there utilize it for their own recreation.
That's wrong.
And then Cont'd Reservoir itself provides the head pressure and diversion for the Cont'd North and Cont'd South powerhouses, as well as the Cont'd Phase 1 canal system, which we'll talk about at the next workshop. But for now, in this particular picture, you can see the powerhouses. Over here on the left-hand side, you'll see a dark square box. That's the Cont'd North powerhouse. It was constructed in 2010, or actually reconstructed in 2010. It uses run-of-river and consumptive rights for power generation, and we do have a PPA with PG&E through October 5th of 2024. This is one of those facilities, however, we're not paid on standby, correct? We're paid on actually how much we generate. And then likewise, the other side of the river, you can see this little structure here. That is the Cont'd South powerhouse. It was constructed in 1984. Power is generated there strictly on run-of-river and not for consumptive uses. And we do have a power purchase agreement with the city of Lincoln, the city of Lodi via the Northern California Power Agency through December 31st, 2023. Kind of one of those outside deals we made that didn't involve PG&E, so that's a unique one there.
So that one just came back before the board just recently.
Yeah.
And then we have three questions. Okay, let me catch up here. So from Harvey, is Grass Valley in the district or out of district? This is a question we get quite often.
Yeah.
It's technically out of the district. There is a very old agreement by which we wholesale water, the district does, to Grass Valley, and then they treat the water. You know, we do quite often hear, well, that would be considered surplus water, and so NID could essentially not serve them water, which really isn't the case. When it comes to a public health and safety issue, I can assure you that if we decided to not serve Grass Valley or Nevada City water, we would have some state intervention. And so that is something we do need to address at some point. The big difference between in-district and out-of-district from our perspective is from a fiscal, financial perspective, and out-of-district, they do not pay property taxes. But with that said, they do pay a higher municipal rate. And so this is something on our list that we do need to address with those two cities. I think it's important to get that issue resolved once and for all. But I can assure you, it's probably not likely we would ever not be serving them water. It would actually create a huge health and safety issue, which the state frowns upon. Did I miss anything on that one? You've taught me well, Chip.
Good job.
Okay, and then we have from Mr. Herring, was Cont'd Reservoir recreation originally intended to be for private use only?
That's
a great question.
Really good question.
It's a really great
I have an answer for
I don't know, we would
I'll
have to
look
do
that
some
one up.
research on that one.
My take is it devolved that way. Evolved that way.
Yeah.
We can look that up, there is some information.
Yeah,
We don't know that.
Mr. Herring, let us do some research for you and get back to you on that one.
Certainly, we know the land was owned by one individual, Mr. Cont'd, right? And he donated he donated the land for the facility. Whether or not it was meant to be public or not,
Yeah, that is a good question. Let us see if we can't dig through some of our history on that one. And then from Ms. Suarez, where does the water from Cont'd powerhouses go after generating power?
good question. So the Cont'd North powerhouse is utilizing the water that's being put, generally speaking, into our Cont'd Phase 1 canal. So it's our consumptive demand that's spinning up that generator. In times when there is excess flow, run-of-river flow, we'll put those flows into our canal, but we're also dumping out of the canal and putting it back into the Bear River.
Is that indeed what's happening in this picture?
In that
Because
picture, you
the
can
whole,
see.
the whole dam is spilling water plus water out of the power plant.
What year was this picture taken, do you know?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
This 2017?
About last month,
What's that?
about last month.
But it spills very frequently.
Is it?
Yeah, out there.
And as far as Cont'd South, as I mentioned, it is only a run-of-river facility. So it's diverting the water, taking it out, putting it through the powerhouse, putting it right back into the Bear River and sending it on down the lake.
Okay. So then we have one more comment, great answers to that, and a great question. And Harvey just wanted to point out that, another point, and he is right, in addition to a fiscal perspective from Grass Valley, Nevada City not being in the district, they also don't participate in our elections. In order for a new area to be included into the district, they have to go through an annexation process, which requires a number of items, but one of the most important items is a tax sharing agreement with the city in which the territory in which they're annexing out of and into, as well as approval by WASCO. So the comment was followed up with redistricting should address Grass Valley. Unfortunately, at this time, until they were annexed in, it couldn't address Grass Valley, but that is certainly a point of consideration if they were ever to annex in, because it would definitely sway the population split.
Mm-hmm.
So, all good comments. And we are 15 minutes early.
About that, I feel like I talked for 4 hours.
No, I think you did a wonderful job. You know, just so the public, something special that I came to understand, and I'm sure most people can agree with, that we have an extremely complicated system from a number of perspectives. One, it was built well over 100 years ago. There's very heavy regulations involved. We have a lot of shared facilities. So I do want to give big kudos to Chip and his team, especially for, I think he ran off already before we could brag about him. He had a Fish and Wildlife meeting to attend, but it is an extremely heavy lift from staff's perspective to make sure, we have to make sure we have water where we need it, when we need it. We have to make sure we're in compliance with all of our rules and regulations and our water rights, and we have to report on all of those things. And as many of our participants stated, we all care. We don't want to see anything bad happen to the watersheds either, or result in something terrible to happen. So we do take that all take a lot of consideration in what we do. But I know that it's a daily, minute by minute thing that TOR has to do to move water around in compliance with all of our water rights.
And a close coordination, not only with BGE, but our Hydroelectric division, and thank you to them for supporting the slideshows tonight. They provided a lot of information and pictures that we got.
Yeah, it does. We're kind of in divisions, right? But it takes everybody working together as a team to get this moving through, because, water ops can't work without hydro, and hydro can't work without water rights, and everybody needs maintenance to help us fix things, and so, big kudos to the staff. We do have a couple of folks that wanted to ask some questions.
Yep.
Rich, did you want to go first?
One quick observation is how much work got done in the mid-60s.
Yes, yeah,
Huge.
right. Some very, very impressive work.
I think it speaks too to the importance of our work with this plan, is that we're talking about the next phase of major infrastructure potentially. So that legacy that we're the beneficiaries of is what we need to be sure to continue.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Can you turn your mics on
Yeah,
while we're here?
Okay, and then we have a couple of folks that are wanting to ask questions. I am having here we go.
I have Otis Wallen.
Mr. Wallen, would you like to go, please?
Yes, I'd also echo the congratulations on this presentation. It's very useful, and I think as part of the public record, it will be useful for many years to come. However, it actually looks at history, and this is the plan for water for the next 50 years, and so for a couple of reasons, I think that it would be useful to do a equal presentation on PG&E's drum system. The reasons being the waters are commingled already. Everywhere where you convey water commingled with PG&E, you're affecting watershed function. And the watershed function of this commingled water affects the South Fork of Yuba River watershed. And so the water is commingled, it's also a source of purchased surplus water quite frequently for NID. You buy water out of the drum system. 25,000 surplus acre feet of water is often purchased. So it's also a source of supply for you already. And, 25 years ago, when John Drew and Ron Nelson worked with Dave Renninger and myself and Ed Horton to put together the PCWA NID committee, which still meets as the 2x2 committee, the intention was to move towards a joint powers authority and to eventually acquire the drum Spalding system. And we are actively looking at that even today. The discussions about actively taking on now the divided drum Spalding FERC license, and the Bear Canal portion is going to be acquired relatively soon. But after the FERC license is issued to drum, you can believe that they may or may not be offloading that system. It's not a profitable system for them as far as hydropower goes, because it's a water supply system primarily and not a peaking system. So I think that it would be useful as you look at the next 50 years. You will probably, with coordination of PCWA, be managing the drum system and its South Fork watershed waters. The roughly 150,000 acre feet of water at play there. So I would like to see you looking forward with as much detail as you have looked back the history of the organization. I think it would be useful to inform what you're actually going to be planning to do over the next 18 months. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Chris, there is one more hand raised that I am having difficulty seeing.
Stuart Feldman?
Mr. Feldman, would you like to go, please?
Thank you very much. And Chris, Chip, you did a fabulous job with the presentation, and I learned an awful lot. However, looking at the planning matrix, I don't know when it's appropriate to ask a question about structural and maintenance adequacy and how the planning for maintenance or deferred maintenance and how you assess risk for earthquake, fire, storm damage. Is that in the development of the plan, or is this an appropriate place where that be addressed? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is a really good question, and something I know that is at the forefront of staff's mind. So currently, we have maintenance and operations addressed from a couple of perspectives, and one of those perspectives is looking at our supply delivery considerations and then kind of strategy options to meet our needs moving into the future, because it could be an operational modification or improvement or an efficiency that we implement or decrease in supply. But Mr. Feldman does bring up something I think that is very important, is that we do have some significantly high-risk facilities from a damage perspective. So obviously that needs to be planned for. So I think that what we should do as staff is figure out when that fits in. The idea was to then tier into, after the plan for water is completed, into a raw water master plan, a treated water master plan, a watershed management master plan, and then kind of the systems operation plan. And I can see components woven into all of there. So let's take that comment back and see. I do think it's something that would actually, and I know I'm gonna kick myself saying this, but I think that we could actually use a full meeting on risk and to our facilities.
Yeah.
So let me come back if the board agrees and have that conversation. I think that's a good idea.
No, it's critical.
It is critical, and I think, the original idea was to interweave it in, but as I think that we have fire risk more on our front door, that is probably something that is warranted to have a deeper conversation about, especially in consideration of the South Yuba Canal, keeping me up at night.
Yeah, risk management is part of our due diligence.
It is, and it really feeds into our master planning, right?
Yeah.
So if there's sections of flume that need to be piped or tunneled or otherwise rerouted, you know, if we don't plan for it, it's not gonna happen. So, I do appreciate that comment, and if the board agrees, I see Ricky nodding her head, thumbs up. Let me kind of work with staff and figure out when we will bring that back. And I promise we will stop adding stages to the.
Stop adding meetings?
Stop adding meetings and stages after this process. But I appreciate that, comment, Mr. Feldman. And then we had a couple more items in the chat, and let's see here. We had a lot of really great jobs, Chip, so kudos to you and your team, and also to Hydro for lending their support.
Yeah.
We have one that says, will you be addressing in the next meeting concerning Lake of the Pines, lake water and flows? And that is included, yes, it is included in the lower division. And then Harvey brings up what I think I just touched on, infrastructure and demand management improvements and alternatives, which I think will tier out of possibly this risk discussion that we have. And then a couple more well done, so great job.
Can I ask?
So just a quick process check-in, or how are we doing? How are we feeling about the timing of the meetings,
Yeah.
length?
Spot on.
I think we'll find our stride.
Yeah.
And we will resolve our audio issues. I am on a mission, so don't fear.
Can I add one final comment? Yeah, and just to circling back at the beginning of the conversation, at the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Litton mentioned that, you know, to recognize that these were all indigenous lands to begin with. And so touching on the Combie conversation, it wasn't Mr. Combie donated, we don't know it. It was really the land was the indigenous people's land before it was taken for anthropogenic uses. And so we should always just keep that in mind. I think it's important.
And I think those are good topics to touch on and have better recognition of when we go through the watershed stage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well done.
Yeah, I would like to cycle back to Otis's comment, because we didn't really say yay or nay on that. And I think it's important to just acknowledge that. It seems to me that rather than have an entire session on that topic, that be brought up as one of the future investment opportunities that the district needs to be considering as part of the future, as opposed to going through kind of what we did with Chip tonight and last session. That's just my opinion, and I just want to acknowledge that possibility exists. And so I think as we're looking at that forward look, that's important.
And I agree. I think you made a very good point about that.
Yeah, because we do have a JPA with PCWA to acquire that.
Yeah.
So if I may, it was a great comment and a good suggestion, and something we had thought of way back when we redid the coordinated operating agreement in 2013. And within that agreement, it does spell out what would happen in the event of a transfer of the facilities, and that NID is protected, and we have the first right of refusal, and this coordinated operating agreement covers the next 50 years. So I'm not saying it's bulletproof, and I think it's certainly something we should discuss and talk about, but we did do some exercise in trying to protect the district and its assets in regards to that transfer should ever.
And I think it also speaks to the importance of continuing to explore partnerships and ways we can work better with South Sutter, with PCWA, with UBA, and PG&E. I think that, as we know, water is becoming more and more scarce, and so I think we're going to have to leverage our watersheds and take care of them and protect them and use our resources together to make it work.
Yeah.
That agreement that Chip referenced, we got a lot out of that. That was really well done.
All right, and then Harvey had one last comment. You are now discussing strategic plan issues that should be codified specifically in that planning. And I agree. I think that that's a very good comment, and I do think that we'll probably touch on that during our strategic planning. At least I hope so.
Yeah.
And would recommend we do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
All right.
Director Heck, we don't want to leave you without any opportunity to make any comments. Is there anything you'd like to add?
Thank you for that opportunity. I'm great. This was just a wonderful exercise, and kudos to Chip and staff, and this was terrific. And I think it was great for the public. You know, they get to see just how complicated our system is and the amount of skill that it takes our water operations and hydro folks to push this level and, or this, you know, lever and that dial to keep everything moving, you know, the way it needs to. So it was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
That's all we have, so we will be back. We will be getting a calendar published, doing some other logistical work, working on our sound issues. We will get
Matrix.
those taken care of.
So our next meeting on January 11th.
January 11th is the next meeting, and just as a quick reminder, we have a board meeting tomorrow where we will be doing a budget workshop to do a review of the proposed budget, and then the following week, Chris, on the 15th, we do have the budget hearing, so we welcome all participants.
Very good.
So we have
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer.
6 o'clock at dot.
Thank you, staff. And
Thank you.
meeting's adjourned.